أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد, my respected elders, my dearest youngsters, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this segment, as per the request received from Islaah admins, we're going to be critically reviewing the educational video entitled, Are the Imams alayhimus salatu wassalam merely righteous scholars? So this brings us to Nazariyat al-Ulama al-Abraar, what's known in scholarly circles as the Ulama Abraar theory. It's a very early classical theory within Shi'ism. It's basically a school whose proponents claim a very human conception or picture of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. So they believe that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam are the most distinguished, righteous, God-conscious, God-fearing scholars within the Ummah, and that is why they are supposed to be accepted as Imams, and their transmissions are supposed to be relied upon and followed. But the proponents of this view reject other more supernatural or superhuman qualities and attributes that the other school, the Kufan school within Shi'ism, tried to attribute towards the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, such as divine status, such as infallibility, divine appointment, supernatural powers, wilayat takwiniya, ilmul ghaib. All of these superhuman and supernatural visualizations or picturizations of the Imams were rejected by this early Madani school. Obviously, it had proponents in Kufa as well. And scholarly research shows that this school was very powerful and very dominant. In fact, according to some researchers, it was the mainstream Shia school. The rest were deviant fringe groups, or they were considered to be deviant fringe groups. So in any case, they have made an educational video about this topic, which does give some good summaries and it does provide some useful content, but it's in need of critical review because unfortunately in such a short video, in 10, 13 minutes, 15 minutes, you cannot really do justice to this theory. And that's why I don't think that the video is intended to even address this issue in depth. I think it's more like raising some critical questions about the claims of this school within Shi'ism. In any case, with regard to our feedback and our critical review, we would say that while the video has some valid points that are made and some useful information is presented, there are some areas that are in need of review and reconsideration. The first observation that we can share in this regard is that the video starts out at a rather misleading note. Or you could say the video is a little bit economical with the truth, if we may put it that way. Because it starts by projecting Nazariyat Ulama al-Abraar, or the Ulama Abraar theory, as a view or an opinion that has been propounded by and that has been raised, an idea that has been originated by Ayatollah al-Sheikh al-Dr. Muhsin Kadiwar. So the way the video starts and the way the video presents the content, the unlearned viewer may develop the impression that this is a modern theory that is being propounded by a modern scholar by the name of Ayatollah al-Sheikh Dr. Muhsin Kadiwar. When in reality that is not the case. Ayatollah Sheikh Muhsin Kadiwar has only tried to revive the discussion about this theory and about this school. So he has a book that he has authored in Persian, which has also been translated into Arabic under the title Al-Qira' al-Mansiyya, the forgotten reading, or rather you could say the forgotten schools within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. He's talked about the evolution of Shi'ism and how there were competing rival ideologies within Shi'ism. So you had these two trends, one trend which humanizes the Imams, and this trend existed among some of the most learned and respected and esteemed companions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. this humanist or very human-centric, anthropocentric perception of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. And he says there was this rival school, which you may call the school of Kufa. Yani school of Kufa is a broad term. There are a lot of people who don't belong to the school of Kufa, but they originate from Kufa. So one must not confuse. When we talk about the school of Kufa, we mean what later became predominantly known as the school of Kufa. Otherwise, the school of Medina itself has a lot of people from Kufa. A lot of people who studied under Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, they went back to Kufa, but then what version of Shi'ism were they preaching or promoting? The Kufan or the Madani? No, the Madani, because they studied under Imam at Medina and they took his Madani ideas and they brought them to Kufa. So in any case, the important point is that it is not very accurate to say that this idea has been raised or it originates. I don't think that the scholar is exactly trying to say that, but that's the impression that the viewer who doesn't know better would get. He would think that Nazariyat al-Ulama al-Abraar is a theory that has been propounded and that has been advocated in the modern period, in the 20th or rather 21st century, by an Iranian scholar who goes by the name of Dr. Mohsin Kadiwar. Now, obviously, we have no issue with Ayatollah Dr. Mohsin Kadiwar. He is himself a brilliant product of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. He studied the Muqaddimat and Sutuh in the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. He attended Bahth al-Kharij under Grand Ayatollah al-Sheikh Hussein Ali al-Muntaziri. And he obtained the station, he achieved the station of Ijtihad and was given ijazah of Ijtihad after he completed his Bahth al-Kharij. So he's a respected scholar from the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. But he is not the one who has come up with this idea. He's not the originator or innovator of this idea. Rather, the most you can say is that he is a prominent scholar in the modern period, in contemporary times, who has actually devoted quite some energy to discussing and talking about this buried and suppressed school within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. This school which in the past used to be the mainstream, but today it has been reduced to being a fringe school within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. So in any case, you cannot attribute this idea to him and project it to the public like it's his idea, because he has merely gone into the sources and he has discussed where this idea is coming from and who are its proponents and what their views and theories were. So then the question becomes, if Ayatollah Sheikh Mohsin Kadiwar is not the originator of this school or this idea of al-Ulama al-Abrar, then who is the originator? Where does it actually originate from? So I hope you understand our first observation with regard to this educational video, is that it falls into the fallacy of false attribution or misattribution. It gives us a misleading picture of who actually is behind this idea. It gives you the picture that it is Ayatollah Mohsin Kadiwar who is the advocate of this idea and who is the proponent. Whereas the reality is, yes, he is in the modern period describing this theory, he's writing about it, he's written a whole book. But this theory and this school actually goes way back to the time of Imam Abu Abdullah Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam himself. So you find that among his learned companions and most distinguished students, you find proponents of this theory and this view. And you cannot say that there were Sunni or there were non-Shia or there were, well, Salafism and Wahhabism did not exist back in that time. So yeah, you cannot attribute it to some other school. This is the school of Ahlul Bayt. There are proponents inside it who are propounding and advocating and promoting this idea, this human anthropocentric conception and perception of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. What is the evidence? Well, if you go back to our most authoritative and one of the oldest books of Ilm al-Rijal that we have, which is Rijal al-Kashi, which has been abridged by Shaykh al-Ta'ifa Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi, you find in it this narration. And this narration really can be said to be the starting point for the term. Yani the concept and idea existed before, but the term al-Ulama al-Abrar for the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, you can trace it back to this particular narration from Rijal al-Kashi. What does the narration say? We've presented it previously in the bahth of imama and whether it is among the daruriyat of deen or not, but there's no harm in quickly going over it again. The narration says, تذاكر ابن أبي يعفور ومعل بن خنيس فقال ابن أبي يعفور الأوصياء علماء أبرار أتقياء. There was a debate, a discussion, a kind of intellectual exchange between Ibn Abi Yafur, who is Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, Abu Muhammad, and Al-Mu'alla bin Khunais. These are two contemporaries of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Abdullah bin Abi Yafur is one of the most distinguished students of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, as we shall see. And Mu'alla bin Khunais is also a contemporary of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, but obviously not of that level. In any case, they have an exchange, an intellectual exchange between them, and they have a sort of a debate, you could say. What is the motion of this debate? Ibn Abi Ya'fur pushes forward the motion that al-awsiya'u ulama'u abraru atqiya. He says the awsiya, the vicegerents, the successors of the Prophet, these imams of Ahlul Bayt that we follow, they are ulama, they are scholars, highly learned people. Abraar, they are extremely righteous. Atqiya, they are God conscious and God fearing. And it is because of this that we essentially follow them, because they are the most learned, they are the most pious, the most righteous, the most God fearing and God conscious personalities in the ummah. And that is why we should hold fast to them and follow them and accept their transmissions of the sunnah. Ibn Khunais, Al-Mu'alla ibn Khunais, he opposes this view. He wants to push forward another view, which is, he says, no, you are demoting their station. What do you mean, ulama abrar? Just righteous scholars? There's so many righteous scholars in the ummah. So what distinction then do the imams of Ahlul Bayt have, right? Ibn Khunais says, no, we have to give the imams a higher station, a divine station, which is how? He says, al-awsiya'u anbiya. It is more appropriate to say that the awsiya, the imams of Ahlul Bayt, are anbiya, they are prophets. Their station is like the station of the prophets. So now they had this debate, they had this disagreement and divergence of views. Lucky for them, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam was alive at that time, and they had the opportunity to take their disagreement to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam himself for adjudication and arbitration. So when they presented themselves before Al-Imam Abu Abdullah Ja'far ibn Muhammadin al-Sadiq alayhi afdalu salati wassalam, the narration says, فَلَمَّا اسْتَقَرَّ مَجْلِسُهُمَا قال فبدأهما أبو عبد الله عليه السلام فقال يا عبد الله أبرأ ممن قال إنا أنبياء. The narration says, when they had settled down in the majlis and in the presence of Al-Imam Abu Abdullah Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam addressed them. And he turned to Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur and he said, Ya Abdullah. He doesn't address Al-Mu'alla bin Khunais. He's not even looking at him. He turns to Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur and he turns to him and he says, Abra'u mimman qala inna anbiya. He turns to Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur and he says, O Abdullah, I disassociate myself. I disconnect myself. I have nothing to do with anyone who claims that we are anbiya, that we are prophets. So what happens essentially, and this is where in Rijalul Kashi, if you look at the Qum edition, which has been edited by Jawad al-Qayyum al-Isfahani, published by Mu'assasat al-Nashr al-Islami, التابعة لجماعة المدرسين بقم. It's the publication division of the Association of Teachers at the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. So this is the Qum edition, the first edition of 1427 AH, page 213, biography entry number 116, narration number 4/456. This is the reference, and it is an authentic narration as per traditional Rijali standards. The traditional scholars of Rijal, they authenticate this narration and regard it as reliable. So what's happening in this narration is that you have two viewpoints that are being presented before Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he completely disassociates and distances himself, he detaches himself, he disassociates himself from the view of al-Mu'alla ibn Khunais, who is trying to give him the station of prophets. And whose view does he therefore do taqreer of? Whose view does he endorse and affirm? The view of Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, because he does not contradict it, he does not negate it, but rather he does taqreer of it. So basically the ulama Abraar theory then becomes a theory that is first propounded in words by a distinguished student of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. It is presented before him and he endorses it and approves of it and rejects the other counterclaim, which is trying to place Anbiya on the same pedestal, or rather the Imams on the same pedestal as Anbiya, as prophets. So from this you understand that there were these differing ideologies within Shi'ism in the very early period. And the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they sided with this anthropocentric school, the school of Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, and he's not alone in this. You have numerous companions, the most distinguished companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and their students and their students' students. Basically, Ayatollah Shaykh Muhsin Kadiwar goes on to demonstrate how this view was not unique to Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, it was not isolated, rather it was the mainstream. And the view of al-Mu'alla ibn Khunais is a view that exists among the Shia, but it exists only among the deviant fringe groups. It is found at the fringes of the community. But the mainstream community is with the Imams and with their most distinguished companions. Now, who is this Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur? And can we label him or describe him as a deviant or alternative thinker? Because he is proposing and pushing for the ulama Abraar theory? Well, it's difficult because first of all, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam endorses him, and not only endorses his view, but him as a person. So you find that's why the scholars of Rijal, if you go to them, they all classify him as a trustworthy and reliable narrator and student of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and they are full of praises for him. So it is possible that if Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur were to come today to our communities and our community centers, yes, the less learned mullahs and the people who don't know better might label him a deviant or alternative thinker, because this is the watchword these days that you see on the mouths of the mullahs, that anyone who differs even a little bit with the mainstream is immediately branded as a deviant or alternative thinker. Well, what about Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur? His understanding of imamah, and remember, he believes in imamah. He is a very staunch follower of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. But his reasoning why we should follow Imam al-Sadiq is different from what today would be regarded as a mainstream understanding. His reasoning is we follow them because they are the most learned, they are the most distinguished, they are the most pious. So very similar to the kind of view that you have today for the marji'iyya and why the maraji' should be followed. So if you ask the people, are maraji' appointed by God? They would say no. Are they infallible? No. Do they possess miraculous supernatural powers? Well, the Irfanis would maybe have some claims in this area for certain Irfani scholars, but generally speaking, if you ask traditional mainstreamers, they wouldn't exactly say that Maraji have got supernatural powers or wilayat takwiniya or ilmul ghaib or things like that. So then why should you follow the Maraji if they are neither infallible, nor are they appointed by God, nor are they don't have any of those sifat? Then why do you follow them? Why do you do their taqleed? The answer would be, well, because of the sifa of a'lamiyya and afqahiyya, because they are the most learned and the most insightful, they have the deepest insight in deen, and they are the best we got. You know, you show us someone better than them and we'll follow them. That's what the traditional muqallid would say. Similarly, this school, the Ulama Abraar school in the classical period, in the early classical period, this is what they would also say for the Imams. They would say, yes, we're not claiming divine appointment or infallibility or any of those supernatural attributes that the Ghulat are giving them, but we still follow these Imams. We still consider them to be our Imams. We follow them. In fact, if you go into the reports About Abdullah bin Abi Yafur, you find certain Zanni reports where you see him saying that, for example, he tells Imam Sadiq alayhi salam to his face that my trust in you and my belief in your imamah is such that if you were to cut a fruit into two halves, let's say a pomegranate, and you were to cut it into two halves and say that this half is halal and the other half is haram, I would accept that and I would believe in it. I would follow that. Even though logically it doesn't make sense. How can one fruit, it's the same fruit, if the Imam says one half is halal, the other half is haram, how can that be if it's the same fruit? But he's trying to show you, Abdullah bin Abi Yafur in this narration is being showcased as someone who doesn't question or challenge the Imam. He follows and obeys the Imam unconditionally and without asking too many questions. So he says, I don't apply my logic that Ya Imam, why one half is halal, what? No. You are the most trustworthy transmitter from Rasulullah. You are the most pious. You are the most learned. And I have no reason to doubt you because your sanad, your chain connecting you to Rasulullah is so impeccable. It is so flawless. It is so beautiful that I have no reason, I have no good faith basis to doubt anything you transmit from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's why if you were to transmit to me that half of a fruit is halal and the other half is haram, I would accept it. I would not use my logic and question and say, well, this doesn't make sense. Why is one half? No, none of that. I would obey you and follow you. So this school also exists in early Shiaism, in early Shia history. You have people who believe in imamah, but their conception of imamah is very different from what later became established as the mainstream conception of imamah from Shaykh al-Mufid and his time onwards in the 5th century. In the early period, you have Shias like Abdullah bin Abi Yafur who say we follow the Imam, we consider him to be the Imam and the leader, and we follow him and we accept everything he transmits without making any supernatural or unfounded claims about this particular Imam. So now, coming back to the question, today if Abdullah bin Abi Yafur were to come in our communities, what would happen? I think obviously it's clear the less learned people who are not familiar with their own history, with the evolution of the school, the phases that it went through, the changes that have come about, such a person may end up thinking that this distinguished companion of the Imam is a deviant thinker or an alternative thinker. They might ban him, they might brand him, they might do all of the usual stuff that they usually do. But here's where I feel we need to appreciate the difference between the scholars and the public. And efforts should be made, I believe, to bring the public at least to the level of the scholars, at least the amount of tolerance and respect for differences of opinion that you have at the level of scholarship. I think if we can translate that to the level of the public, I think that would be a great step. And I think Islaah and organizations like it can lead the way in this, to at least explain to the public what your scholars have said. If you just come on the same page as your own scholars on such issues, I think you'll make a lot of progress. How? Let's see what Ayatollah al-Uzma Sayyid Abu al-Qasim al-Khuy has to say about Abdullah bin Abi Yafur. In his Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith wa Tafsil Tabaqat al-Ruwat, the 24-volume encyclopedia in Ilm al-Rijal, he has an entry number 6691 is on Abdullah bin Abi Yafur. Go and check what he has written over there about Abdullah bin Abi Yafur. What does he tell you about him? Does he say, oh, beware, O Shia, this is a deviant alternative thinker whose view of imamah does not agree with our mainstream view today? Or does he warn you against him, or does he praise Abdullah bin Abi Yafur? Oh, he's full of praises for him. He starts by quoting An-Najashi. He says An-Najashi has said about Abdullah bin Abi Yafur that his name is Abdullah bin Abi Yafur al-Abdi, wasmu Abi Yafur Waqid, wa qila Waqdan, yukanna Aba Muhammad, thiqatun thiqa. So Ayatollah Sayyid Abu al-Qasim al-Khuy quotes An-Najashi, Abu al-Abbas al-Najashi, who is the 5th century authority on Ilm al-Rijal, whom Sayyid al-Khuy relies on the most and whom he considers to be the most authoritative scholar of Rijal from the classical period. So what does An-Najashi say about Abdullah bin Abi Yafur? He gives you the name of his father, Abu Yafur. His father's name was Waqid. Some people say it was Waqdan. His kunya is Abu Muhammad. And as far as his status is concerned, he says, thiqatun thiqa. He's a double thiqa. Extremely reliable. Whatever he transmits from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, you accept it because it is reliable and authentic. Not only that, he says, Jalilun fi ashabina. And Najashi, the great Shia scholar of Rijal, says he is among the most esteemed and distinguished scholars of our group, of our sect. Jalilun fi ashabina. He's one of us. So you can see they don't excommunicate him or throw him out of the school just because in this particular matter he happens to have. Well, actually, they couldn't because, as Ayatollah Muhsin Kadiwar has explained, this theory, this is not the 21st century. And Najashi is not a street level mullah that he would, use this kind of language. He's a deviant alternative thinker. No. He says, as far as we are concerned, he's one of our greatest scholars. Jalilun fi ashabina. He has a very high position among the people of our community. Kareemun ala Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. He is Kareemun ala Abi Abdullah. He was one of the most beloved and favored companions and students of Al-Imam Abu Abdullah As-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. وَمَاتَ فِي أَيَّامِهِ. And he died during his lifetime. During the lifetime of Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur passed away, because they say he passed away in the year of the plague, which is 131 AH is when he passed away. So he passed away during the lifetime of Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, and the reports indicate that Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam was well pleased with him at the time of his passing away. He prayed for him and praised him even after his death. So Kareemun ala Abi Abdullah. Najashi says you can't discredit this person as a deviant or alternative thinker. He was one of the most beloved personalities to Abu Abdullah as-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he died in his lifetime. So we know that the Imam was pleased with him even after his death. He died on haqq. وَكَانَ قَارِئًا يُقْرِئُ فِي مَسْجِدِ الْكُوفَةِ. And Abdullah bin Abi Yafur was not some street level person or some Tom, Dick or Harry or some greengrocer in Medina. No. وَكَانَ قَارِئًا يُقْرِئُ فِي مَسْجِدِ الْكُوفَةِ. Abdullah bin Abi Yafur is one of the Qurra, one of the learned reciters of the Quran, and he used to teach the Quran in the Masjid of Kufa. Al-Masjid al-Jami', the grand masjid of Kufa. He used to sit there. He spent his life teaching people of Kufa the Quran. So you can see this is a companion who is connected very strongly to both of the Thaqalain. The Kitab of Allah, which he spends his life teaching people in the Masjid of Kufa. And so his link with the Kitab of Allah is that he teaches it. And his link with the other part of the Thaqalain, which is the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam, his link with them is also extremely strong and robust. He is among their most distinguished students, and he transmits their fiqh and their knowledge and insight of deen to the rest of the world. So he's a true proponent and true holder and promoter of the Thaqalain. He devoted his life to promoting both the Quran and the established Sunnah, which the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam were promoting and transmitting from their pure and matchless line that goes all the way back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Abdullah bin Abi Yafur really is credited with transmitting some very useful information about the deen and things that are relevant, especially today. If you look at the narrations of Abdullah bin Abi Yafur, it's not like they have not survived. No, they have survived in our books, and there are numerous narrations which are narrated from him, and they contain very useful and precious knowledge, a lot of which is relevant to our times. For example, one instance, one riwayah, one authentic riwayah that we can share with you. This is a gift for our youths, our young people, boys and girls, right? A lot of you find yourself, especially in the Indian subcontinent and in some other communities in the world as well, a lot of our youth sometimes find themselves in an unenviable and invidious situation, in a kind of a dilemma and predicament in which Abdullah bin Abi Yafur also once found himself. He reports, there is a whole bab in Al-Kafi that Al-Kulayni has labeled or titled ماذا يفعل الرجل أو باب إذا هوى الرجل امرأة وهوى أبواه امرأة أخرى. The chapter on what to do and what does a man do, what is the hukum shar'i for a man who falls in love with a woman or with a girl, he likes her and he wants to marry her, but his parents don't approve of her because they want him to marry another girl or another woman. So in this dilemma, in this predicament, if you find yourself in such a situation, what do you do? What's the hukum shar'i? Right? So yeah, unfortunately, this is a very common problem at times, because you have some parents who are very dictatorial. They want to impose their will and their choice on their children. When in reality, the correct Islamic teaching is that you should not impose. You should not, you're not dictators. Allah has not given you a dictatorship over your children. He's given you wilaya, yes, yani authority, but that authority is more wilayatul ri'aya. It is an authority that you should use to defend their best interests, to serve their best interests, not to impose your will and your choices onto them. Okay? Because they have to lead their own life. Your life, you led it. Now let them lead their life in accordance with what they consider to be best. But in any case, unfortunately, some parents, they impose their will on their children and they force them, even in a matter like marriage. They don't let their children, their sons and daughters, have their say or have their way. Rather, they want to impose their choices and their preferences. So if you ever find yourself in such a situation, what is the hukum shari? Obviously, ethically speaking, from an akhlaqi point of view, it is always advisable to have your parents on the same page with you. Even if there is a difference, you sort it out, you talk to them, you reason with them, you persuade them as best as you can, and you maintain the best possible akhlaq no matter what you do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow you to disrespect your parents or diss your parents under any circumstance. Even when they command you to do shirk, Allah says, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Your treatment to them or with them in this dunya has to be based on ma'roof. It should be a decent, good, respectful treatment. You can differ with them in opinions, no problem. But your dealing and your behavior with them always has to be the best, based on the best of akhlaq. So in any case, Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur faced a similar situation. He came to Imam Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, and he says, قُلْتُ لَهُ إِنِّي أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَتَزَوَّجَ امْرَأَةً وَإِنَّ أَبَوَيَّ أَرَادَ غَيْرَهَا. He says, Ya Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq, I want to marry a woman, a girl that I like. But the problem is, وَإِنَّ أَبَوَيَّ أَرَادَ غَيْرَهَا. But both of my parents, mother and father, both of them are against my choice. They want me, they have chosen a different girl for me. They want me to marry her. So what should I do now? Should I honor, what is the hukum shar'i? Yani from a fiqhi point of view, what am I obligated to do? So now look at the answer of Imam Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He gives him a very simple answer, one-liner. He says, تَزَوَّجِ الَّتِي هَوَيْتَ وَدَعِ الَّتِي يَهْوَى أَبَوَاكَ. He says, marry the woman, marry the girl that you like, and leave aside the woman that your parents like. Yani, follow your choice. This is your life. You will have to lead your life with this woman. You see, if you get married to a woman you don't like, it's going to become very difficult for you to fulfill her rights. She has Allah, the moment she becomes your wife, she has rights over you. She has huquq, which Allah will hold you accountable for. If you marry a woman you don't like, just because your parents or society or some other consideration, well, it's going to become so difficult for you to honor and respect her rights. And you will end up failing the test. So don't do that. Marry the girl that you like, that your heart is inclined towards, and leave aside the girl that your parents like. This is not their life. They live their life. Okay? Maja kari lida, now it's your chance. It's your life. Final decision is yours. Yes, you should consult with your parents. You should persuade them, convince them, try to bring them on the same page. All of that is good. And even if they don't come on the same page, your akhlaq to them cannot change. You have to show the highest degree of respect to them. But from a fiqhi point of view, if you go ahead and disobey them and marry the woman of your choice, you are not committing a sin. You're not violating any law of God. You can do so with a clean conscience and free of guilt. So this is the beautiful teaching of Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, that who transmitted to us? Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, and this narration has been authenticated by even traditional akhbari scholars like Al-Allama Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi in his Mir'at al-Uqul fi Sharhi Akhbari Ali al-Rasul in volume 20, page 142. He declares this hadith to be muwathaq, to be reliable and authentic. And similarly, the other great scholar of hadith and rijal, Al-Allama Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Bahbudi, in Sahih al-Kafi, has also authenticated this narration from al-Kafi in volume 3 of his Sahih al-Kafi, page 23. It is hadith number 2957 of Sahih al-Kafi. So, as you can see, Abdullah bin Abi Yafur is a great transmitter of fiqh and halal and haram and knowledge of the sunnah and knowledge of the deen from Al-Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, and a lot of what he transmits is very relevant today. As I mentioned, in the Indian subcontinent, especially if you go to neighboring Pakistan, for example, you find this is a huge problem. Many of our youths complain about the kind of system you have. And not just there, even here, I had a Maulana friend of mine who, when he was 3 years old, a cousin sister was born in his family. And his grandfather fixed the marriage then and there. The moment the cousin sister was born, she's barely a few days old, and he's a toddler, 3 years old. The grandfather said, let's fix the marriage between these two. Yani, they didn't have the nikah, but he said, this is my wasiyah. When they grow up, get them married. So you didn't consult, obviously you can't consult a toddler, you can't consult a suckling infant. But basically the grandfather, he said, this is my wish, that our family, we should remain connected. And the best way to do that is you make this grandson of mine marry this granddaughter of mine. So that way the family will remain united. I don't know what was the thinking usually is, they want to strengthen family ties or things of that sort. But in any case, without his consultation, without asking he just gave this advice, this wasiyah, that he said, even if I'm dead, when they grow up, you marry them. And that's why when he grew up, he was told, this is the wasiyah of the grandfather. It becomes an emotional card, trump card, and then they guilt trip you and all of that. But this is actually un-Islamic. You are not supposed to impose your will on other people. And even if someone does, your grandfather, your grandmother, your father, whoever, Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam says, ultimately power is in your hands. This is your right. This is your life. If you don't like someone, you don't have to marry them. It's as simple as that. This is the hukum of the Sharia and the fiqh of Al-Imam Ja'far As-Sadiq alayhi salam. So this is quite relevant, as I said, for many of our youths. In Pakistan, it's very common, and in some parts of India as well, for cousin marriages. There's such an obsession with cousin marriages. And a lot of these cousin marriages, unfortunately, there is consent on paper. But consent is not something that should only be sought at in theory and at the paper level. Consent should be there from the heart. And investigation should be done into the Prophet and the Imams. They teach us the girl should be asked properly. Not that, Sharma Huzuri mein keh diya but her actual heart is somewhere else, or she's not willing. No, it should be investigated what she wants, and it should be investigated what he wants. And only when two mutually consenting adults are fully signed on to the idea that they want to marry each other, only in that circumstance should you go ahead and have the nikah. But unfortunately, what we see is quite different from what Islam teaches in this regard. In some parts of Pakistan, it is so common to have these cousin marriages. It's like it's a done deal. Even before it happens, everyone knows it's going to happen. That's why you find so many of these cousin brothers, in Pakistan, they tease their cousin sisters. And they say things like, tum jisse bhi ishq ladana hai, jaake lada lo. Jisse pyar karna hai, pyar kar lo. Shadi to tumhari hami se honi hai. And then these cousin sisters, bichari, they get teased, pehle bhaiya, baad mein sayya. Yeah, he was first your brother, now he's your husband, and stuff like that. But in any case, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they say that final authority and power devolves on the person concerned. Outside external personalities, parents, grandparents, relatives, they can serve in an advisory capacity. Okay, ultimately your parents, people will say, well, but in fiqh, the father has wilayatul ab, he has authority. So Baba, that wilaya is just like power of attorney. The father is supposed to serve as a lawyer, okay, as an advocate, as an attorney, okay. If I have a company and I hire a lawyer, the job of that lawyer is to serve my best interests and to do what I want. If he goes behind my back and signs deals that I am not privy to or that I'm not satisfied with, then this is wrong. This is unethical. It is illegal as well. And that's why we have instances in the Sunnah where the Holy Prophet invalidated such nikah. Yes, ultimately he used to return power in these matters to the person concerned. We have numerous reports in the Sunnah of women or girls, both first-timers and previously married girls, who come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They complain. One of these was Khansa binti Khidam al-Ansariya. She came, and there are also other reports of other women coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and complaining and saying, Ya Rasulullah, my father or my parents have married me to so and so, to my cousin brother or to my this relative, without my consent. And in all such cases, what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He says, it's up to you. If you endorse this nikah, fine, it will be accepted as valid. But if you want to dissolve it, it is invalid. It's up to you. And in fact, with one such woman, the Holy Prophet gave her the authority, and she was a very smart woman. She said, قَدْ أَجَزْتُ مَا صَنَعَ أَبِي. She says, okay, now that my father has already married me off to this person, I'm going to approve of this marriage. I'm going to hold on to it because Rasulullah gave her the power. Do whatever you like. You tell me what you want. She said, okay, in this case, well, my father has, already married me to this person that I was not very much into, but now that he has done it, قَدْ أَجَزْتُ, I've approved of it, no problem. وَلَكِنْ أَرَدْتُ أَن تَعْلَمَ النِّسَاءَ أَن لَيْسَ إِلَى الْآبَاءِ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٍ. She says, I just came to you, Ya Rasulullah, I had no intention of dissolving this marriage or invalidating the contract. No. I just came to you, Ya Rasulullah, to make a statement so that the women of this ummah should know that أَن لَيْسَ إِلَى الْآبَاءِ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٌ, that fathers and parents have no authority in this regard to go against the wishes of their daughters and those who are under their care. And the isnad of this is also sahih. It is also these are authentic reports that we have from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So yeah, basically this is one of the transmissions of the report of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been transmitted by others, but the report of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has been transmitted by Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur. So this is what An-Najashi, we ended at what An-Najashi had to say about him. And lahu kitab, he has a book in which he collected the sayings and statements and transmissions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and that book was received by others and it was transmitted, and that's how the reports from that book have ended up in other books of hadith like Al-Kafi and the others. Okay, moving on. So this, the reference of An-Najashi is Rijal al-Najashi, which is published by Sharikatul A'lammi lil Matbu'at, Beirut. It's the first edition, which was brought out in 1431 Hijriya, page 205, entry number 556. That's where you'll find the entry on Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur in the Rijal of An-Najashi. Moving on, Ayatollah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khuy says, وَعَدَّهُ Shaykh al-Mufid. An-Najashi is not the only person who authenticated Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur. You also have a Shaykh al-Mufid. Even though Shaykh al-Mufid himself personally does not subscribe to the Ulama Abraar theory, his theory of imama is much closer to what is believed today, what is mainstream today. But despite the fact that Shaykh al-Mufid does not exactly accept this Ulama Abraar theory, but does he discredit Ibn Abi Yafur on these grounds? Does Shaykh al-Mufid say, well, because your theory of imama does not agree with our theory of imama, therefore you are a deviant and alternative thinker? Well, absolutely not. Sayyid al-Khuy says, وَعَدَّهُ الشيخ المفيد في رسالته العددية من الفقهاء الأعلام والرؤساء المأخوذ منهم الحلال والحرام والفتيا والأحكام الذين لا يطعن عليهم ولا طريق لذم واحد منهم. This is on page 103 of Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith, volume 11. Sayyid al-Khuy says, Shaykh al-Mufid listed Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur. He mentioned the name of Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur in his Risala al-Adadiyya in the list of the greatest fuqaha, al-fuqaha al-a'lam, the most distinguished jurists from among the companions and students of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Shaykh al-Mufid mentions Ibn Abi Ya'fur in that list. وَالرُّؤَسَاء الْمَأْخُوذ مِنْهُمُ الْحَلَالُ وَالْحَرَامُ. He mentions Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur among the ru'asa, among the leaders from the schools of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So not all the companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and not all of his students are of the same level. The ulama of Rijal and the scholars of the Shia, they grade them into different grades because not everyone spent the same amount of time, nor was everyone able to master the ulum that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam were transmitting as much as everyone else. So there were grades, there were darajat. Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur, where do they rank him? Where do they place him? They place him right at the top among the ru'asa, among the leaders from the companions of al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Among the ru'asa. So he belongs to the top brass, the elite core of the companions and students of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the highest echelons of his students. Al-Ma'khudh minhum al-halal wal-haram. Shaykh al-Mufid says he is among those leaders from the school of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam from whom we take our information of what is halal and what is haram, and wal-futya and the fatwa. We take fatwas from them, wal-ahkam and the ahkam of the sharia and the deen. We take it from people like Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur because they are transmitting from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. They are his best and most distinguished students. And he says these personalities like Ibn Abi Ya'fur, الَّذِينَ لَا يُطْعَنُ عَلَيْهِمْ, you cannot, it is impossible to discredit them. وَلَا طَرِيقَ لِذَمِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ, and there is no scope for discrediting or attacking or basically saying anything evil about any of these personalities. لا طريق لذم واحد منهم. This is the view and opinion of Shaykh al-Mufid. So you can see Shaykh al-Mufid is not intolerant when it comes to proponents of Nazariyat al-Ulama al-Abraar. He's accepting them among the students of Imam al-Sadiq. They're among the greatest scholars from the school of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And yes, so what if they differ with your position? No problem, they're still within the school. The greatest scholars of the Shia in the past and even today in the present, they don't expel or excommunicate such students of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam from his school. Then Sayyid al-Khuy continues, he says, وَعَدَّهُ ibn Shahr Ashub min khawasi ashab al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Ibn Shahr Ashub al-Mazindarani, the 6th century scholar, he considers and he lists Ibn Abi Ya'fur among the most elite ashab and companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And then Sayyid al-Khuy writes, كما تقدم في ترجمة حمران تفضيل الصادق عليه السلام له ولابن أبي يعفور على جميع أصحابه. He says, and if you recall our entry on Humran ibn A'yan, who's the brother of Zurar ibn A'yan, right? He says, if you go to our entry on Humran in Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith, Sayyid al-Khuy is saying, you will see that we've already mentioned their evidence of the fact that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam used to consider Humran bin A'yan and Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur to be a cut above the rest. Yani he used to believe Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam did tafdeel. Yani he believed these two companions, Ibn Abi Ya'fur and Humran bin Ayun, to be superior to the rest of his companions. He did tafdeel of them over and above all his other companions and students. So that's why they cannot discredit Abdullah bin Abi Ya'fur. No matter how much he differs with them in opinion and his view and understanding of Imamah, you cannot throw him out of the school. You cannot label him as an alternative thinker or a deviant thinker. He's very much inside the school of Ahlul Bayt. He's a flag bearer of the school of Ahlul Bayt. He was devoted, he spent his entire life devoted and committed to promoting the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet as it was being transmitted by the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, particularly Al-Imam Abu Abdullah Ja'far ibn Muhammad As-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi wa ala abaihi at-tahirin. So I hope in light of this, it becomes clear and you can begin to understand why it is so important to understand the diversity that exists within the school. Unfortunately, less learned segments and myopic leadership within our communities is labeling theories and ideas and views that were held by some of the most distinguished companions of the Imams. It wants to label those views and those opinions as instances or examples or specimens of deviant and alternative thinking, which is really a tragedy. And unfortunately, we can't blame them too much. Obviously, what you've been taught at the madrasa level, what you've been fed right from your childhood, in light of all of that, obviously it appears to you that what you believe today was always the view of all the Shias from the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. But the reality is, when you dig deeper, when you go deeper into history, you realize there were different currents, different trends, different schools. In some periods, some schools were dominant and other schools were considered to be fringe groups. In other periods, those suppressed fringe groups, they made a resurgence and they started asserting their authority, and in some cases they even became the mainstream. So these ups and downs, history has gone through them. The biggest myth and misconception that our public has, and which is why whenever they encounter any new research, their first question is, okay, so for the last 1400 years our scholars were not aware of this. So, Baba, for the last 1,000 years your scholars are promoting one thing, and then you have a turning point in history, the mainstream gets reversed, the deviant fringe group, they become the mainstream. So this whole question of 1400, you think you have a uniform history of 1400 years? No. During this 1400-year period, the deen has come to you through many ups and downs. There were many different periods, epochs, eras, different political, social, cultural, literary circumstances contributed to the growth and emergence of different schools. And so you just have to understand that there is diversity within the school of Ahlul Bayt, and be careful before you label a certain view or a certain opinion or a certain scholar as a deviant thinker or alternative thinker, because it's very possible that the person that you are labeling as deviant or alternative in thinking is someone who was well approved by the Imam. And it's very possible that what you consider to be the mainstream view today, as Ayatollah Sheikh Abdullah al-Mamqani keeps on repeatedly mentioning in his 39-volume encyclopedia of Ilm al-Rijal entitled Tanqih al-Maqal fi Ilm al-Rijal, he repeatedly reminds you of this. He says, don't be under any illusion that you have a uniform 1,000-year history of 1,400-year history. No. He says, أكثر ما يعد اليوم من ضروريات المذهب كان القول به في العهد السابق معدودا في الغلو والارتفاع. He says majority, not a minority, majority of what are considered to be the ضروريات of the madhab, the most fundamental beliefs of the madhab, في أوصاف الأئمة, with regard to the qualities of the imam and the station of the imam, what the imam really is, what's his position. He says majority of what you believe about this today in the past was considered to be deviation, because the mainstream of the past was not the mainstream of today. The tables have been turned. The mainstream of the past, in many areas, their view was completely different from your view, such that if they were to come today, as Ayatollah Mamqani quotes other scholars showing you, says if they were to come today, they would expel you and excommunicate you from the madhab. It's just because many of the mainstream views today in the past, they were only held by the ghulat and the mufawwida, and the ghulat and mufawwida were a despised fringe group. They were hated, they were cursed. No one wanted to associate with them. But with time, they became the majority, or some of their views became more mainstream. So now what's the solution? The solution is it's very easy to label somebody as deviant or to label somebody as an alternative thinker, but then you have to think about the consequences. It's very possible on the Day of Judgment, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you meet them, if He makes you meet them. Imagine the amount of awkwardness if you meet Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur and you see Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he's very close to him and he's praising him, and you find out that, well, Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur, his conception, his idea of imamah was completely different. That's not a problem. Difference of opinion is okay, but then if it turns out your files are opened and it emerges that you were labeling people who held Abdullah bin Abi Yafur's view as deviant and alternative thinkers, then imagine the awkwardness that would exist between you and him. You don't want to face the companions of the Imams and the Imams themselves on the Day of Judgment and be embarrassed to learn that so much of what you believed about them, they considered as deviant or fringe group views, which they do not support. It would be most embarrassing if that were to happen. So yeah, that's why there are a lot of suppressed schools within Shiaism. What you see as the dominant mainstream view today was not always the dominant mainstream view. There were many ups and downs, tumultuous upheavals that the community went through until you reach this point. So it is very naive to just assume that whatever is mainstream today must be the haqq because this is what Shias have been believing for the last 1400 or 1300 years. Absolutely not. The aqidah has gone from, it's like ja'alna aliyaha safilaha. Yani it's upside down. So in so many areas it's upside down. What you believe to be darura, fundamental of deen, oh, sorry, not deen, fundamental of the madhab, they consider to be ghulu and irtifa and deviation and heresy and blasphemy. And a lot of things that they used to consider to be the cornerstones of their methodology and their understanding of imam, today you are considering it as deviant and alternative thinking. So that's why, what's the solution? The solution is, well, let's the solution is let there be, at least if our public, our community leadership, if you can at least come to the level of the scholars. See, today's mainstream scholars, I think if you can come up to their level, it's good progress. It's a step in the right direction. Today's mainstream traditional Shia scholars, if you go to them with Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur's view, they will say, yeah, we respectfully differ. We feel they are more inclined. So they will not support Mu'alla bin Khunays's view either. But you see what Mu'alla bin Khunays, he's the leader of a trend within Shi'ism. Just as Abdullah bin Abi Yafur, he's a very powerful and influential figure within Shi'ism. Mu'alla bin Khunays was not respected by the mainstream, but within the ghulat, within the deviant fringe groups at the time in the classical period, oh, Mu'alla bin Khunays was a hero. And so he had his gang, he had his followers, he had people who looked up to him. And so what they did was basically they went back to the drawing after this debate. This was a debacle. As far as Mu'alla bin Khunays is concerned, it was a fiasco because the imam, to his face, he didn't even address him. Addressing Abdullah, he says, whoever claims this claim, I have nothing to do with this person. I disassociate myself. So this was, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam discredited the other schools so badly that this other school had to go back. They were the ghulat, obviously. Sometimes in academic discourses we refer to them as a school, which is a very, it's a respectable term. The ghulat, it's doubtful if they deserve to be called a school, but khair, in academics we call them schools. Yeah, so the ghulat, they went back to the drawing board and they said, okay, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has discredited our claim of nubuwah. So what to do now? We see the ghulat were very rebellious. I can bring you narrations from Al-Kafi itself where the ghulat argue with Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and the imam tries to convince them that your understanding of imama and wilaya is completely wrong. You are trying to thrust and impose this view on the ummah and show it that it's God mandated and God ordained. This is not what we want you to do, and this is not what we are claiming. Our claim is different. We are simply claiming that we are the best transmitters of the sunnah of Rasulullah. That's enough. That's why the ummah should follow us and accept our leadership, is that we are the best transmitters. But khair, there are ghulat who argue with Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Sadiq al-Islam tries to convince them. He says, no, if we go by your understanding, the whole Muslim ummah will become kafir. Do you understand the consequence of what you're trying? If you make all of this, if you make us part of the deen, okay, if you make us part of the madhab, no problem. No, not the whole ummah doesn't want to join your madhab, right? If you make us part of the deen, then anyone who denies us or who does not accept that special station that our followers accept for us, then the ummah which doesn't accept that, they become kafir. They become outside the fold of Islam. So don't put this inside the deen. Keep this outside the deen. The deen is what the Prophet and what the Quran is showcasing. The aqidah of the deen is clear in the Quran. Look at Surah 2 verse 285. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا إليك المصير. Okay, ربنا وإليك المصير. So in Surah 2 verse 285, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you the aqidah of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt and the Sahaba. That they believe in Allah, they believe in His angels, they believe in His scriptures, they believe in His prophets and messengers. and they believe in the last and final day of judgment. Beyond that, there is nothing that's part of the aqidah of the deen. Beyond that, you have your schools in deen. How do we, in fiqh, in sunnah, how will we pray? How will we fast? How will we do wudu? In these things, you have different transmissions. Sahaba are transmitting, Ahlul Bayt are transmitting. The school of Ahlul Bayt said, look, we will give precedence to the transmissions of Ahlul Bayt because they are the most learned, most God-fearing, most pious, most knowledgeable, most learned. They have the clearest line back to Rasulullah, so we will follow them. So, but you find the Ghulat, they did not like this view, and that's why they argued with Imam al-Sadiq. And Imam al-Sadiq tries to explain them. He says, no, your view is completely wrong. And the worst part is they're attributing their view to him. And Imam says, this is not my view. I'm telling you it's not my view. And it is really evil that you should say things about us which we have not said about ourselves. This is what they always tell the Ghulat. And that's why they define Ghulu as الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ فِينَا مَا لَا نَقُولُهُ فِي أَنفُسِنَا. The people who claim stations for us or things and attributes for us which we have not claimed ourselves. So in any case, during the time of Imam, yes, the Imams campaigned very ferociously against the Ghulat. They discredited them. And that's why what happened eventually was the Ghulat went back to the drawing board. Just as what they did with divinity, with Rububiyyah. They first tried to claim openly and explicitly that Imams are what? They are God. Imam Ali is God, God incarnate. The Imams, they ferociously rebutted them and refuted them. So they went back to the drawing board and they said, okay, look, you cannot get away, you cannot survive in the Shia community if you go about saying that Imams are gods. The Shia will, in the words of Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar, مَزَّقُونِ كُلَّ مُمَزَّق. They will tear you apart to pieces. The Shia are very intolerant of anyone making Imams into gods. So the Ghulat said we have to be smart and subtle. Let's not say with our mouths that they are gods, because you will be caught. That will immediately raise a red flag. So here's what you do. Slowly and gradually, you invent narrations. Don't do this on your own. If you go out to the Shia on your own, you don't have any narrations from the Imams, and you stop making weird supernatural claims about them, the Shia again are going to tear you to pieces. They're not going to tolerate this. Yeah, the Shia of the past, one thing about them is true. They were quite intolerant. They were not, as far as deviation and heresy is concerned, yeah, they were very strict. They would expel you from their city, excommunicate you, do all of that stuff. Which now we realize they shouldn't have done, because look at what happened. They tried to suppress Ghulu by force. Today, mashallah, that Ghulu became the mainstream. So what is the lesson of history? If you suppress something by force, it will emerge, you will actually make it victorious. Yeah, that's the classical mainstreamers. They, in a way, you could say they oppressed the Ghulat. They were very hard on them. They expelled them. They were really mean to them. Natija, result, the mainstreamers of yesterday, today they have become a fringe group, and the Ghulat, because they were suppressed, their ideology grew. It spread until it asserted itself and took over the mainstream. And so this is a message to the mainstream of today, is if you oppress and if you persecute the fringe groups within the school of Ahlul Bayt today, if you oppress and persecute the reformists, you will give them more strength and energy. Tomorrow they will become the mainstream. And then how would you want them to treat you? If your track record, see, today we cannot complain if the mainstreamers of today, they oppress and persecute the fringe groups of today. Historically you can't blame them, because when the fringe groups of today were the mainstream yesterday, they were not nice to the to the Ghulat and the deviant groups. They were really harsh, very, very harsh on them. So today, now that they are the fringe group, they don't have right to complain and say, oh, you are persecuting us, you're expelling us from your community, from your city, from this. They don't really have the right to say that, because today's Ghulat and today's Mufawwidha can say, well, guess what? When you were in the mainstream, you persecuted our antecedents and our forefathers. You expelled Sahl ibn Ziyad al-Adami al-Razi, who was such a big proponent of Wilaya, and narrations of Wilaya have him in the Sanad. And yeah, you expelled him from Qum just for, narrating narrations about Ahlul Bayt which you did not approve of. So you expelled him, you expelled Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Khalid al-Barqi, you were very harsh and mean with those whom you consider to be the deviant fringe groups. So now we are the mainstream, the Ghulat will say, now we will do the same with you. It's basically as they say, the empire strikes back. So the Ghulat have struck back. But for the future, the lesson for today's mainstream is you need to be more tolerant of the fringe groups. Tomorrow, if the fringe groups become, and especially if you persecute them, if you don't give them, freedom, and if you don't give them respect, they will grow. And after growing, they might become the mainstream tomorrow. And then how would you like them to treat you? So do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? So yeah, let them exist. Don't force. I personally, if I were to go back to the classical period, I would tell the scholars, I would say, yeah, these people are deviant as per the teaching of our imams, but don't, because the scholars of the past, man, they used to straight away give fatwa of qatl and things like that, which we believe today, in light of our research of the actual teachings of Ahlul Bayt and the Quran, these fatawi are completely unjustified. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La ikraha fid din, no compulsion in religion. So respect human life, let everyone, whatever views they have, even if they differ with you, let them live and let live. Okay, don't go after people, don't physically assault or persecute or oppress people just because they disagree with you. Let them live. Let them promote their deviant claims, you promote your truthful claims, and let them both peacefully coexist, and let whoever's arguments and evidences are more compelling, let the best man win. But unfortunately, the classical scholars of the past, they didn't follow this approach. They followed heavy-handed approaches, and the result was their movement lost out, and other movements, the movements that they were suppressing, their thoughts and ideologies they grew and they became more powerful. So yeah, that's one lesson to learn from history. But in any case, coming back to what we were talking about, in terms of the mainstream of yesterday, yes, the ashab of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and the classical scholars, the early Shia scholars, Ayatollah Sheikh Muhsin Kadiwar says that these views, which are being regarded as deviant and alternative thinking today, in the past, they were the mainstream. They were quite mainstream. You had the deviant fringe groups who did not accept all of this. In any case, the ghulat, they went back to the drawing board, just as what they did with divinity of imams. So first they claimed divinity with their mouths. They said imams are divine. They are gods, or they are lords. They are arbab. The imams discredited them, and they issued ferocious rebuttals, denying their lies. So what did the ghulat do? They went back to the drawing table, and they said, look, if we call them gods, it will raise red flags. So slowly and gradually, let us invent narrations, attribute them to the imams, and prove that imams, yes, they are not gods. Yani you can't say they're gods with your tongue. But slowly, let us transfer all the unique and exclusive attributes of God to the imams using a hadith which we invent and attribute to the imams, and then spread them among the Shia. So what will the result be? The result will be that the narration is not saying imam is God. If the narration says imam is God, the Shia will immediately, a red flag will be raised, alarm bells will ring, the narrator will be expelled from the city. All of these things will happen. So don't be direct about it. Don't be explicit. Rather, go the implicit, subtle route, which is to say that, well, imams are not God, but they have ilm al-ghayb. Imams are not God, but they answer the supplications of those who supplicate to them. Imams are not God, but they're all hearing and all seeing with God's permission. Imams are not God, but they do give rizq. Imams are not God, but they give life and death. Imams are not God, but they give rain. They are the ones who control rain. Imams are not God, but the entire universe is subservient to them. Every atom in the universe is under their control. Imams are not God, but slowly you transfer all the sifat of God. You transfer to them with His permission. Of course, you have to add that caveat that everything, all the powers of Allah that they have with Allah's permission. Conveniently disregarding the fact that this is a very big iftira against Allah, because Allah never confirmed this and the imams denied it. Slowly, they made imams into divine beings without explicitly saying that they are gods. Now, even at this level, the Shia of the past were not fools. They discredited these narrations. They called them fabrications. That's why they have survived today. But when you look at their chains, you look at narrators, you go to the books of Rijal, you see these narrators have been classified as ghulat. So that's how you know all those narrations claiming that Imams have, ilm al-ghaib, they know everything, they know what's inside the hearts. All of that is coming from where? It's coming from the school of the ghulat. But khair, the ghulat became more smart, and that's why they were able to spread their ideology without raising too many alarms. Now, the mainstream were not fooled by this, but within deviant groups, fringe groups, these ideas were very popular. And then with the passage of time, change of political and social circumstances, their narrations, their fabrications started becoming more and more popular until they began to influence and have their impact on mainstream understandings, especially in the Safavid period. Same thing they did with Risala. They wanted to claim that Imams are Anbiya. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam openly and in public discredited them. He dealt a huge blow to their claim. So the Ghulat, the followers of Ibn Khunais, they went back to the drawing board and they said, okay, we can't say they are prophets. The moment you say they are prophets, it will raise alarms, red flags, this, that, create problems for you. Don't say with your mouth they are prophets. But let's be smart about it. Let's be more subtle. Let's blur the lines of demarcation and distinction between Imams and prophets. So with our mouth, we don't say that they're prophets. But all the stations that we believe for prophets, let's slowly and gradually transfer them to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. So if we believe prophets are appointed by God, say the same thing for them. If we believe they're infallible, say the same thing for them. If we believe they have miracles, even though not all prophets are given miracles. Our own prophet was not given visually spectacular miracles. He was given the Quran. The Quran is not a visual miracle. They said, no, we'll claim all kinds of miracles for the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, but we don't have evidence. It's no problem. Let's invent narrations. You go to the narrations of those supernatural events, you find ghulat in the chains, mashallah. And even where you don't find ghulat, you know that these are probably narrations which they have invented using sahih chains. Because when the Quran says, وَمَا مَنَعَنَا أَن نُرْسِلَ بِالْآيَاتِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly announces that He has changed His policy in Surah 17 verse 59. He's not going to send visual miracles because previous nations falsified them, so there's no point in sending them. But despite this, they try to give Imams visual miracles. All of the sifat of the prophets, including wahi and tahdith, the angels speak to them. Everything they wanted to transfer to the Imams. But they said, this time be careful. You transfer the sifat and attributes of prophets, but don't call them prophets. You call them prophets, the Shia will tear you to pieces. They will expel you from the city. So no. Slowly and gradually, and in a very subtle manner, you give the sifat of the Prophet until you reach an imamology that is no different from prophetology. Yani everything prophets have, almost 99% of that, or even 100%, they have. You blur the lines, you blur the distinction between Imams and prophets. So their station becomes that of prophets, and later on the Ghulat even went higher than that. But khair, that's a different bahth. But yeah, you blur the lines and you make them look like they are, but you don't say with your mouth. So what they did for divinity, they also did for the Risala, for Imamah. Yeah, for Risala, meaning they blurred the lines between Risala and Imamah and they made it. But the early classical Shia, they said, no. There's a very clear distinction. Imams are merely pious, righteous scholars. The prophets, that's a different portfolio. That's a different job description altogether. The Imams are not prophets. They don't bring a new deen or a new sharia or a new book or new revelations from Allah. Rather, they simply endorse and confirm and transmit the most authentic and authoritative version of the correct prophetic practice that we call the Sunnah. And obviously, they also have great insight into the Book of Allah, and therefore their guidance is the best and most reliable means of guidance for us after the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I realize we've taken up much more of your time than we had actually intended, but there are still some evidences that are left and still some unanswered questions. So for example, towards the end of that educational video, there was a critical question that was posed by the scholar, which is that if you're going to say, if you were to go to the Ulama Abraar proponents and say, well, your opinion and your view and your theory doesn't really do justice to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, because if you're saying they're Ulama Abraar, they're pious and righteous scholars, then isn't that like a demotion of their station? Isn't that like you are basically bringing them lower than what they actually are. You're putting them in the same line as Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi'i. And so the ulama Abrar actually would not agree with this assessment. They would say that we don't consider them to be ordinary scholars. No. We consider them to be the best and the brightest and a cut above the rest. So they are not, if you went to the ulama Abrar proponents, they would not accept this claim that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is just like Imam Abu Hanifa, he's just like Imam al-Shafi'i. They would say, no, there is a big difference. They say, what is the difference? They said, the difference is that these Imams themselves, yani the Imams of Ahlul Sunnah, like Imam Abu Hanifa, like Imam al-Shafi'i, like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, like Imam Malik, they themselves have testified that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt are way above us in knowledge, in taqwa, in distinction, in scholarly distinction. So it is like saying that, so from their perspective, the way we would explain it is, for example, if you say that, your local resident alim is a scholar, and if we ask you, what is Sayyid Sistani, or Sayyid al-Khamenei, or Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani, what are these? So they're scholars. So your resident alim is also a scholar, and Ayatollah Sistani is also a scholar. Say, well, technically, yes, they're both scholars, but there is a world of a difference. This one is this scholar is at the level of ijtihad, and this one is barely completed the muqaddimat or the sutuh at the most, right? So yes, there is one world of a difference, but it's not a difference that the difference is very, it's within the level of humanity. Yani, human beings have degrees. Okay, someone can be at the very top, and someone can be at the very bottom, and someone can be in between. But at the end of the day, they are not superhuman. You're not taking them outside the fold of humanity. So no one would say Sayyid Sistani is superhuman. But the fact that he's a scholar and a pious scholar doesn't mean that you necessarily feel or believe that, he is of the same level as your local resident alim. I mean, technically speaking, yes, your resident alim is also a scholar, Sayyid Sistani is also a scholar, but there's a world of a difference. The ulama Abrar people, this is their view. They say the Imams, the difference between your local resident alim and Ayatollah Sistani would be the kind of difference that they would propose between the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and the rest of the scholars of the Ummah. They would say, these Imams where they are and the rest of the Imams where they are, everyone knows, and this is something that would even be endorsed by the Imams of the Ummah, by the Imams of Ahlul Sunnah. So for example, if you were to go and ask Imam Malik ibn Anas, and the ulama Abrar, they would use these kinds of testimonies, the proponents of this view. Imam Malik ibn Anas himself, he testifies. He's also an Imam. He's referred to as Imam Dar al-Hijrah, the Imam of the Madani school, right? But Imam Malik, what testimony does he give about Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam? Does he say, oh, he's just, he's my colleague, he's of the same level as me? Or does he say, as is reported in Manaqib of Ibn Shahr Ashub, that Imam Malik used to say that ما رأت عين ولا سمعت أذن ولا خطر على قلب بشر أفضل من جعفر بن محمد الصادق علما وعبادة وورعا. That Imam Malik went on record testifying that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has conceived of an Imam who is more learned, more pious, greater in worship and in piety than Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So if you ask the ulama Abrar, what's the difference between Malik and Imam Sadiq? They would say this is the difference. That Imam Malik himself is testifying that yes, I am a scholar. And yes, he's also a scholar. But ما رأت عين ولا سمعت أذن ولا خطر على قلب بشر أفضل من جعفر بن محمد الصادق عليه السلام علما وعبادة وورعا. That there is no one, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no heart or mind has ever imagined of an Imam who is greater and more superior in knowledge, in ibadah, in piety than Ja'far ibn Muhammad. So he's a cut above the rest. He is the Imam of the Imams. He is the highest, and he is at the highest level. Yes, he's not an ordinary scholar like the rest of the scholars. He's at the highest level of scholarship. This is what they would say. Similarly, Amr ibn al-Miqdam, he says, كنت إذا نظرت إلى جعفر ibn Muhammad علمت أنه من سلالة النبيين. So this is also one of the early authorities. He says, whenever I used to see Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the moment I used to see him, I used to immediately recognize that I'm looking at someone who is descended from the line of prophets. He is an extract, he is an extension of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His character, his personality reminds you of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he's his sixth grandson from Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha, right? He's the sixth Imam and he is from that direct bloodline. And then he says, وَلَا تَخْلُو كُتُبُ أَحَادِيث وَحِكْمَةِ وَزُهْدُ وَمَوْعِظَةٍ مِنْ كَلَامِهِ. He says the station of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in knowledge is such that no book of hadith or hikmah, wisdom, or zuhd, yani incitement towards austerity and simplicity in dunya, وَمَوْعِظَةٍ, the books of exhortations and admonitions, no book in the Islamic sciences, whether it be the jurisprudential sciences or whether it be the ethical and moral sciences of Islam, no book is free or empty of the narrations and the transmissions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. This is his contribution to the Ummah. This is why we consider him Imam. And he says in every book that you open, you see the scholars saying, قَالَ جَعْفَرُ بْنُ مُحَمَّدٍ الصَّادِقِ قَالَ جَعْفَرُ بْنُ مُحَمَّدٍ الصَّادِقِ. All the scholars are drinking from this fountain, from this kawthar. So this is the station. Similarly, Imam Malik ibn Anas also used to say, when he talks about Imam Ja'far, he says, Ja'far ibn Muhammad اختلفت إليه زمانا. He says, I used to visit Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam for a long time. I used to visit him. فما كنت أراه إلا على ثلاث خصال. I never saw him except in one of three conditions. إما مصل, I either saw him praying, وإما صائم, or he used to be fasting, وإما يقرأ القرآن, or he used to be reciting the Quran. So this is Imam Malik. Similarly, Al-Yaqubi, the famous historian, he says, وَكَانَ أَفْضَلَ النَّاسِ وَأَعْلَمَهُمْ بِدِينِ اللَّهِ وَكَانَ أَهْلُ الْعِلْمِ الَّذِينَ سَمِعُوا مِنْهُ إِذَا رَوَوْا عَنْهُ قَالُوا أَخْبَرَنَا الْعَالِمِ. Al-Yaqubi, he says that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was the best of the people. وَأَعْلَمُهُمْ بِدِينِ اللَّهِ, he was the most knowledgeable and learned in the deen of Allah. وَكَانَ أَهْلُ الْعِلْمِ الَّذِينَ سَمِعُوا مِنْهُ إِذَا رَوَوْا عَنْهُ, when the people of knowledge, when they used to listen to him and then transmit his narrations, they used to say, أَخْبَرَنَا الْعَالِمِ. They used to say, the scholar told us. Yani, sometimes they would not even refer to his name. When they say the scholar, it means Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So that's the difference. That is, in the classical period, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is not considered just an ordinary scholar. No. He is the scholar. He's not one authority among many authorities. No, he's the ultimate authority. And this is accepted across the board, not just within the school of Ahlul Bayt, but even outside the school of Ahlul Bayt, you find people testifying to this. Similarly, they mentioned the incident of Imam Abu Hanifa, when Abu Ja'far al-Mansur called him, and he said, إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ النَّاسِ أو إِنَّ النَّاسِ قَدْ افتتنوا بِجَعْفَرِ ibn Muhammad. He says, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, the Abbasid Caliph, he's envious of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He's troubled by the popularity of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So he says, I have observed that people are so obsessed with Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. They're such fans of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And so I want you to sort of embarrass him. I want you to put him in an embarrassing situation. How? How do you embarrass a scholar of the level of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam? Well, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he underestimated. He thought that someone of the level of Imam Abu Hanifa would be the perfect person to accomplish this. So he says, Ya Abu Hanifa, فَهَيِّئْ لَهُ مِنَ الْمَسَائِلِ الشِّدَادِ. He says, I want you to prepare the toughest questions. Questions which you as a faqih would testify no one can answer. So prepare the toughest questions, and then we will test Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam with those questions. So Abu Hanifa, this is in his early period, he says, فَهَيَّأْتُ لَهُ 40 مَسْأَلَةً. So he says, I prepared 40 questions of the toughest variety. ثم بعث إلي أبو جعفر فأتيته فدخلت عليه وجعفر بن محمد الصادق جالس عن يمينه فلما أبصرت به دخلني من الهيبة لجعفر بن محمد الصادق ما لم يدخلني لأبي جعفر المنصور فسلمت عليه. He says, finally, when the time came, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, the Abbasid Caliph, he summoned me, he invited me, and Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was already in his presence. He says, when I entered into the presence of Imam al-Sadiq, I was overcome with awe, because Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam had an extremely dignified personality, because he's a direct descendant of the Prophet. So that dignity of prophethood, that dignity and you know, that grace of prophethood was transferred from Rasulullah to his family, and so it flowed with the blood. And so Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam had a very dignified, awe-inspiring appearance. So Abu Hanifa says, when I entered into his presence, I was overcome with awe. And he says, this is very strange. Normally, you would expect that, you know, I would be more in awe of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. He's the caliph, the most powerful man in the land, politically. So I should be filled with more awe of the caliph. But he says, in the presence of Imam al-Sadiq, it's like the caliph didn't exist. The amount of awe that I had for Imam al-Sadiq, it overshadowed the awe that I should have had for Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. So he says, فَجَلَسْتُ, so I sat down. ثُمَّ الْتَفَتْتُ إِلَيْهِ, and then I turned to him. And then Abu Ja'far turned to Imam al-Sadiq. He said, Ya Aba Abdullah, هذا Abu Hanifa. He introduced Abu Hanifa to Imam al-Sadiq. He's telling Imam al-Sadiq, this is Abu Hanifa. Imam Ja'far said, Na'am. He said, yes. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَهَا قَدْ أَتَانَا. So Abu Hanifa says, the Imam said, yes, he has come to us. What is the meaning of he has come to us? So then there is an explanation here. He says, كَأَنَّهُ كَرِهَ مَا يَقُولُ فِيهِ قَوْمٌ أَنَّهُ إِذَا رَأَى الرَّجُلَ عَرَفَهُ. He says it's as if he was trying to debunk and discredit the statement that some people had popularized about him, that whenever he sees a person, he immediately recognizes who that person is, yani even if he has not met him before. So he wanted to discredit the statement, and that's why he said, oh, this is Abu Hanifa, he has come to us. Okay. ثم التفت المنصور إليه. Then Mansur turned to me. Abu Hanifa says, Imam, and he says, Ya Aba Hanifa, ألق على أبي عبد الله من مسائلك. He says, oh Abu Hanifa, present your questions to Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq. فجعلت ألقي عليه فيجيبني. So he says, I started with my questions, 40 questions he had prepared, one after the other, like AK-47 rounds. I started confronting him with those questions. He says, for every question that I spilled before him, this was his methodology. He would say, Antum. Yani he wouldn't give one opinion, no. He would first point to me, Abu Hanifa, because Abu Hanifa belongs to the school of Kufa, not to be confused with the Shia school of Kufa. This is from the Sunni school of Kufa, although at that time they're not called Sunnis, the proto-Sunnis, but in any case, he says, you fuqaha of Kufa, Antum taquluna kada. You people, this is your view. Yani Abu Hanifa has asked him the first question of his 40 questions. For the first question, up till the 40th question, for all of the questions, Imam gives him 3 views, not just one view. He was hoping that Imam would barely be able to answer. He would not be able to give his view. But Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam responds by saying, not only do I know my own view on this, I even know what your view would be on this particular question. So for all of those 40 questions, he tells Abu Hanifa, Antum taquluna kada, you people, this is your opinion. وَأَهْلُ الْمَدِينَةِ يَقُولُونَ كَذَا. Ahlul Madinah, the people of Imam Malik, this is what they say about this. وَنَحْنُ نَقُولُ كَذَا. And we, the Ahlul Bayt, this is our take on this. This is our answer to this question. فَرُبَّمَا تَبَعَهُمْ وَرُبَّمَا خَالَفَنَا جَمِيعًا. So sometimes in some of those 40 questions, he agreed with the people of Medina. In other questions, he disagreed with the Imams of Medina. But حتى أتيت على الأربعين مسألة. But for each of the 40 questions, he gave me all of the existing opinions. The opinion of the people of Kufa and the Ashab al-Ra'i, the people of Medina, and the Ahlul Bayt. So he says, when he was done, I had nothing left to say except to say, أليس روينا أن أعلم الناس أعلمهم باختلاف الناس. He said, he said, have we not transmitted, have we not narrated from our elders that the most learned, the a'lam, the most learned of the people is the one who is most knowledgeable of the differences of opinion among the people. So the learned, or rather the most learned person, is not just the one who knows his own opinion, but rather the one who knows the opinions of others as well on every given issue. And so Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, his level of knowledge was such that he knew this, he knew the views of others, knew the views of the people of Kufa, the views of the people of Medina, and also the views of Ahlul Bayt. And yes, there's a great degree of intersection and similarity between the amal and the ilm of Ahlul Medina and Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, because at the end of the day, he's also among the Ahlul Medina. He's a Madani Imam. And that's why you find in many areas there is similarity between the fiqh of Imam Malik and Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. They're much closer to each other than to other fiqh. An example that we can give of this is, for example, if you look at the narrations in Al-Kafi, another aspect of the sunnah of our imams that people are not familiar with and that has been suppressed, but it's there if you go to the earliest books, is that the imams of Ahlul Bayt, when you open your salah, at the end of your salah, you do the taslim, right? You say Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin, Assalamu alaykum. Yeah, so when you do the taslim, the final taslim, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, in his fiqh and in the sunnah that he transmits, he teaches his students and companions to turn right and left. So when you do taslim in jama'ah, when you're praying salatul jama'ah, yes, at the time of taslim, when you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and you turn right and you turn left. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam explains that you do that in order to greet the angels and also the people. When you're offering salatul jama'ah, your fellow Muslim brothers are to your right and to your left. So you greet them. That taslim is actually meant for them. Now, today this practice has become, you will see it on the fringes, but mainstream scholars, yes. For example, those of you who have watched the Salah of Ayatollah Sheikh Nasir Makarim Shirazi's Mujtahid and Marji' Taqlid, yeah, he's obviously praying as an imam. So for the imam, he just has to turn right. So you will see him doing that. When we were in Dubai, a person once came to my father and complained to him. He said that this wakil of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani, Sayyid al-Kashmiri, he complained about him. He said that this Sayyid seems to have become Sunni. So my father was like, what makes you say that? He says, well, I saw him praying and he was doing the right left. So you see, there are things that our imams actually taught, which today the mainstream public associates with the amal of people from other sects, not realizing that this is there also in your sect. And there are scholars within your sect who are not only believing in this, but they practice it. So khair, my father explained to him that you're mistaken. This is actually, turning right and left doesn't make you Sunni. This is also there in the Shia school. It's there in the oldest books. Imams of Ahlul Bayt, this is how they used to do. But one difference is that when you are praying Furada, for example, in other schools, they say that even in Furada Salah, you do right and you do left. You turn to the right and left. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and Imam Malik, they transmit this, in Furada Salah, you don't need to turn left because you are alone. There is no one to your left, right, when you are praying Furada. So you don't need to turn left when in Furada. When in Jama'ah, you turn left. Now this is not wajib, it is not fard, it is not rukun. That's why we don't piga kelele, we don't make a big deal of this. If people today are not doing it, okay, fine. It's among the mustahabbat, okay. So, but in any case, in Furada, both Imam Malik and Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam say you don't need to turn to the left. So, but in Furada, there's no one to my right either. They say no, for the angel, right? The right-hand side angel who is recording your good deeds, yeah, you're supposed to invoke the salam and the peace of Allah on that angel, even when you're praying Furada. So when you do Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, that salam is intended for the right-hand side angel who's writing your good deed. Now, you see, this is where Someone might ask, well, so the one who's on the left side, what sin did he do? Yani he's recording my evil deeds, okay, but he's doing so with the command of Allah, yeah? So maybe I should also give him salam. Well, other schools, they say, yeah, you should give him salam also. But Imam Malik and Imam Sadiq, they transmit only, in Furada, they only transmit doing salam to the right-hand side. They don't transmit for the left-hand side. In matters of sunnah, we don't apply logic. We just go by what's transmitted, right? So in any case, this was just to show you an example of unanimity between the school of Medina, Imam Malik and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. They're essentially in the same city, and so they have very many similarities. So in any case, Imam Abu Hanifa, at the end of this meeting, he says, yeah, so basically it's established Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is the most learned of the scholars of this ummah, and you cannot say he's of the same level as others. No. He is a cut above the rest. He is the highest. He's the most brilliant transmitter of the sunnah, the most luminous personality in his time. And so he cannot be compared to. And so the question that, well, why does the Prophet then promote them in Hadith al-Thaqalayn? All of that becomes due to their a'lamiyya, due to their afqahiyya, as far as the Ulama Abraar school is concerned. Now, I realize we have taken a lot of time, but there's just some evidences. Obviously, to understand this theory in full and this school in full, you would probably have to read the book by Ayatollah Sheikh Mohsin Kadiwar. It is not, I don't know if it's been translated into English, but it would be a good translation project, at least to educate and enlighten our public of what things used to be like in the past. But yeah, it's definitely there in Arabic. Those interested can read it and benefit from it. But just some indicators. I don't want to give you complicated evidences, just some lightweight evidences, which even our layperson can access. Because Ayatollah Sheikh Mohsin Kadiwar claims that this school, the Ulama Abraar theory, was very popular. It was a mainstream until the 4th century, 5th century. So this sounds very bizarre to people today, but actually if you look at even the books that you have in your home library, I'm talking to the layperson now, you will see traces of this view and this understanding in books that even you have access to. So for example, Nahj al-Balagha. Now you come to Nahj al-Balagha, letter number 6 of Nahj al-Balagha. You see a glimpse of this. Here, you don't see any early Shia. You see the Imam of the Shias, who is Al-Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. He writes a letter to Muawiyah, and in this letter, he says, إِنَّهُ بَايَعَنِ الْقَوْمُ الَّذِينَ بَايَعُوا أَبَا بَكْرٍ وَعُمَرَ وَعُثْمَانَ عَلَى مَا بَايَعُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. This is Nahj al-Balagha. Sharif al-Radi is mentioning this as letter number 6 in Nahj al-Balagha. Imam Ali alayhi salam is writing a letter to Muawiyah. Muawiyah has obviously challenged the validity and the authority of Imam Ali's government. Imam Ali alayhi salam sends him a letter in response to his challenge, and he says, look, you don't have any valid grounds to challenge my government. Why? إِنَّهُ بَايَعَنِ الْقَوْمُ الَّذِينَ بَايَعُوا أَبَا بَكْرٍ وَعُمَرَ وَعُثْمَانَ عَلَى مَا بَايَعُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. Indeed, the very people who gave bay'ah to the first 3 caliphs are the very same people who have given me bay'ah. The people who voted for them have voted for me. عَلَى مَا بَايَعُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. On the same terms and conditions on which they gave them bay'ah, on those same terms and conditions they have given me bay'ah. فَلَمْ يَكُنْ لِلشَّاهِدِ أَنْ يَخْتَارِ. So the person who was witness to this, obviously the Muhajirin and Ansar, they gathered around Imam Ali and they willingly gave him bay'ah. After all the Muhajirin and Ansar, or the vast majority of them, have given Imam Ali bay'ah, the Imam says now the rest of the people who are left who have still not given bay'ah, they don't have a choice. They just have to follow what the majority has. They have to give bay'ah to whom the majority has chosen. وَلَا لِلْغَائِبِ أَنْ يَرُدْ. And you, Muawiyah, cannot even say that, oh, I was absent. If you're absent, that's tough luck for you. But you cannot cancel the election just because you were not there. And then he says, Aslan, whether you were there or you were not there, this is not how the system works in Islam. How does the system work? He explains. He says, وَإِنَّمَا الشُّورَى لِلْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. After the Prophet, how is the political leader of the Ummah going to be chosen? He says, this is how he's going to be chosen. إِنَّمَا الشُّورَى لِلْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. The Shura refers to mutual consultation. It is a method that the Quran promotes. You have a whole surah, chapter 42, that's entitled Surah Shura. And it is called Surah Shura because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when describing the community of believers, He describes them as people وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. The community of believers is described as a community that always determines and decides key issues through mutual consultation. So whenever there's a big issue, a big decision needs to be taken, you do shura. You consult among yourselves and then you try to arrive at a unanimous conclusion. The Muslim community is not supposed to be a community where people act unilaterally. The leader of even the Holy Prophet, who was the leader of the community, Allah tells him, no, even you are supposed to do shura. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Do shura with the Sahaba. Consult the Sahaba. Imagine, even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not exempted from shura in the Quran. Allah clearly tells him, no. Whenever you're going to take a major decision, unless I have commanded you, then you don't need shura. But if you've not received any command from me, and you are thinking of what to do, you should gather the Sahaba, the Muhajirin and Ansar, you should discuss with them. So now, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is no more, what should the Ummah do? The matter of electing a leader is a very big matter. It should not be something that's done unilaterally, without due consultation, without due process. So the Imam says, وَإِنَّمَا الشُّورَى لِلْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. What's supposed to happen is that there should be a shura between the Muhajirin and the Ansar, the immigrants and the helpers, the people of Mecca and the people of Medina, the companions of the Prophet, whom the Prophet always used to consult. They should be brought forward, they should be gathered together, and they should be asked to nominate and select someone as their leader. Now remember, he's saying Muhajirin wal Ansar. Muawiyah is neither from the Muhajirin nor is he from the Ansar. If you go technically speaking, if someone wants to fool you, he'll say, well, but Muawiyah eventually he moved to Medina. So no. He moved to Medina after the Holy Prophet said, La hijrata ba'da al-fath. The Prophet said after Fath Makkah, after Makkah has been opened, you cannot become a muhajir anymore. Yeah, he closed the door to becoming a muhajir after Makkah was opened. So Muawiyah neither comes among the muhajirin nor is he among the Ansar. And that's what Imam Ali is using against him. He says, Shura, aslan, whether you are present, you are absent, is one and the same. You have nothing to do with the Shura. The Shura will be between the muhajirin and Ansar. These are the hardcore companions of the Prophet who were there with him from day one. We are not going to accept in the Shura people who accepted Islam at the 11th hour, just before or after Fath Makkah. So he says, إِنَّمَا الشُّورَى لِلْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. The way things are supposed to happen is, there should be a Shura, mutual consultation between the Muhajirin and Ansar. Okay, after this consultation, this consultative meeting, فَإِنِ اجْتَمَعُوا عَلَى رَجُلٍ وَسَمَّوْهُ إِمَامًا. If they gather upon, unanimously decide upon one person, one man, وَسَمَّوْهُ إِمَامًا, and they call him the Imam, they declare him to be the Imam. After consultation, they discuss different candidates. Finally, they say, no, this candidate seems to be the most qualified, he's the most learned, he's this, he's that. They agree on him, and they say, you know what, we are declaring him to be the Imam. وَسَمَّوْهُ إِمَامًا. So they declare him to be the Imam. كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضَى. Then this is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is pleased and satisfied. The rida of Allah lies in this decision being respected. Whatever the Muhajirin and Ansar collectively, unanimously decide, whoever they decide should be the leader, this decision it corresponds with the rida and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased that that person's leadership should be accepted, whoever it is. فَإِنْ خَرَجَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِمْ خَارِجٌ بِطَعْنٍ أَوْ بِدْعَةٍ رَدُّوهُ إِلَى مَا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ. So if a person then rebels against such a person who has been chosen by the Muhajirin and Ansar, but someone else comes along and says, well, I don't like the choice of the Muhajirin and Ansar, I have a different candidate in mind, the Imam says that will not be accepted. He will be returned. He has to return to the decision of the majority of the Muhajirin and Ansar. فَإِنْ أَبَى, if he does not accept, قاتلوه على اتباعه غير سبيل المؤمنين. It becomes rightful for the Muhajirin and Ansar to wage war against this person and force him to accept the collective decision. That's how democracy works. You know, minority views are respected, but in terms of who gets to be the government, who gets to lead, it's the decision, it's the vote of the majority that counts. And if people in the minority try to resist and try to say, no, we're not going to accept this government, then the government is it's entitled to use force to establish its authority, because it has the people's mandate, it has the majority's mandate. وَوَاللَّهُ اللَّهُ مَا تَوَلَّى. And he says, Allah will, anyone who goes against the decision of the majority, Allah will let him, will leave him to his own devices. So now what is this text? This is found where? In Nahj al-Balagha. Nahj al-Balagha is written at the turn of the 5th century. So until the 5th century, you have this narration, this letter from Imam Ali alayhi salam that Sharif al-Radi is presenting in Nahj al-Balagha. Now, what to do with this? The Ulama, Abraar people would say, see, this is strengthening our case, because Aslan, this is what they used to believe. And this is the Islamic system that Imam Ali alayhi salam believes in. This is how the leader after the Prophet is supposed to be chosen. But now, traditional Shia scholars, would they accept this? They would not. But then what explanation do they give for not accepting this? They don't say this narration is a fabrication or this letter is inauthentic, or they don't say that. At least not those whom we have discussed with. You have two approaches. You have the traditional akhbari approach. You know what the akhbaris say? Their argument is they say, yes, this letter is authentic. Imam Ali alayhi salam did write it to Muawiyah, but he was doing taqiyya. This is not his real inner view. This is his taqiyya. Now this really is an absurd claim, because Imam Ali alayhi salam was not one to do taqiyya with Muawiyah. Taqiyya means, you know what, you're scared of someone, you fear that he will kill you, or your life is in danger, generally speaking, and so that's why you speak the opposite of the truth in order to save your life or to save your honor. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, if you look at his dealings with Muawiyah, you will see, you will get the picture of someone who is clearly not afraid of Muawiyah in the least. Where do you get proof of that? In the same Nahj al-Balagha, you come to us, to come Maulana to letter number 28 of Nahj al-Balagha, which Sharif al-Radi says, min mahasin al-kutub, among the most brilliant letters that Imam Ali alayhi salam wrote to Muawiyah. In light of this letter, you as the audience and the viewer can be the judge. Does Imam Ali do taqiyya with Muawiyah? Is he someone who is scared and terrified to death of Muawiyah? Or is he someone who is fearless when it comes to Muawiyah? Towards the end of his letter, he says, وَذَكَرْتَ, addressing Muawiyah, he says, وَذَكَرْتَ أَنْ لَيْسَ لِي وَلِأَصْحَابِي عِنْدَكَ إِلَّا السَّيْفِ فَلَقَدْ أَضْحَكْتَ بَعْدَ اسْتِعْبَارٍ. He says, oh Muawiyah, I've read your letter. He's responding to the letter of Muawiyah. He says, towards the end of this letter, he says, I came to the part, O Muawiyah, where you have mentioned that you don't have anything for me except the sword. So Muawiyah was trying to intimidate and terrorize Imam Ali alayhi salam. If you look at the original letter which he's responding to, Muawiyah threatens Imam Ali. He says, you know what, if you don't submit to my authority and don't accept my demands, I am going to come with a massive army and I'm going to kill and destroy you and all your companions. I'm going to finish you off, annihilate you, wipe you off the face of this earth, and big words he uses, big threats he issues. So if Imam Ali alayhi salam was a person of taqiyya, you would expect he would respond in a different manner. But look at his response, and then you be the judge whether Imam Ali is the type of person who does taqiyya with Muawiyah, wallah, he follows a different approach with Muawiyah. He says, O Muawiyah, I have read the part of your letter where you have mentioned that you have no medicine for me and my companions except the sword. The sword is now going to decide between us. He says, after reading that point, فَلَقَدْ أَضْحَكْتَ بَعْدَ اسْتِعْبَارٍ. You have made me laugh after you made me cry. When I read the first part of your letter, I was crying at your ignorance. But now when I come to this part where you start trying to scare me and intimidate me with talk of swords and armies and death and this and that, you really made me laugh. You brought, after tears, you brought laughter to me. He says, مَتَى أَلْفَيْتَ بَنِي عَبْدِ الْمُطَّلِبِ عَنِ الْأَعْدَاءِ نَاكِلِينَ وَبِالسَّيْفِ مُخَوَّفِينَ. He says, have you lost your senses? Have you lost your mind? You're trying to resort to these tactics against who? Who are you trying to threaten and scare? Asadullah al-Ghalib, the victorious, ever triumphant lion of Allah, you're going to scare him with this? When have you ever seen the descendants of Abdul Muttalib ever running away from battle, or turning their backs to the enemy, or being threatened or terrified with death? We are the descendants of Abdul Muttalib. You want to scare us with death? He says, فَلَبِّثْ قَلِيلًا يَلْحَقِ الْهَيْجَى حَمَلْ. He says, so then wait a little. If this is what you think, then just wait and see. Let Hamal reach the battlefield. This is a proverb, an idiom. So Hamal was this guy who was threatened. Hamal ibn Badr was a person who was threatened by an enemy, that enemy would destroy and kill him. But before the enemy could even do that, Hamal reached the battlefield, he attacked him and he destroyed him. So that's what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying, that you are threatening me to destroy me, but actually just wait till we get to the battlefield and then you will see what's going to happen. And then he describes what will happen. He says, once you arrive at the battlefield, فَسَيَطْلُبُكَ مَنْ تَطْلُبُ. The one whom you are seeking will actually be seeking you. The hunter will become the hunted. You think you are coming to hunt me, you will realize you are the one who is being hunted. وَيَقْرُبُ مِنْكَ مَا تَسْتَبْعِدْ. And what you consider to be very far will become very near. Meaning you think defeat is a very far-fetched eventuality or outcome or possibility. Yeah? He says, yes, what you are thinking is very far-fetched will come right in front of your eyes. وَأَنَا مُرْقِلٌ نَحْوَكَ فِي جَحْفَلٍ من المهاجرين والأنصار والتابعين لهم بإحسان شديد زحامهم ساطع قتامهم. He says, and I'm advancing towards you. As we speak, I'm advancing towards you with an army of the Muhajirin and Ansar, and those who have followed their example with virtue and righteousness. And the army that I'm bringing is dense. It is intensely it is numerically very heavy. Yani we have good numbers. سَاطِعٍ قَتَامُهُمْ. The strength of our army is such that the dust from their feet will illuminate the battlefield. مُتَسَرْبِلِينَ سَرَابِيلَ الْمَوْتِ. They are wearing their shrouds, the shrouds of death. أَحَبُّ اللِّقَاءِ إِلَيْهِمْ لِقَاءُ رَبِّهِمْ. The best and most beloved meeting in the eyes of the people that I'm bringing to fight you, the best thing in their eyes is to meet their Lord. They're not scared of death. وَقَدْ صَحِبَتْهُمْ ذُرِّيَّةً أو ذُرِّيَّةٌ بَدْرِيَّةٌ وَسُيُوفٌ هَاشِمِيَّةٌ قَدْ عَرَفْتَ مواقع نصالها في أخيك وخالك وجدك وما هي من الظالمين ببعيد. He says, and my army will be flanked and surrounded by the descendants of the veterans of the Battle of Badr. I'm bringing the Badri Sahaba with me. The veterans of Badr, their descendants are going to be on the front lines, and they will be surrounded by sharp Hashemite swords, which have earned themselves a reputation for managing to navigate their way to the necks of your brother and your maternal uncle and your grandfather. وَمَا هِيَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ بِبَعِيدٍ. And those swords are never too far away from zalimin and oppressors like you. He ends his letter with this verse from Surah Hud, verse 83 of chapter 11, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the stones with which he pelted the people of Lut. He says they were marked مُسَوَّمَةً عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ وَمَا هِيَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ بِبَعِيدٍ. Those stones are marked for the wrongdoers from your Lord, and they're never far away from the wrongdoers and the oppressors. Imam says the Hashemite swords and the swords of the Badri Sahaba and their descendants that I'm bringing with me, those swords are never far from Zalimin like you. Within minutes we can deploy them and they will finish off all the Zalimin. So in any case, you read this letter and tell me, is Imam Ali alayhi salam the type who would do taqiyya in front of someone like Muawiyah? He's telling him, what do you take me for? I'm a descendant, Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. I'm a descendant of Abdul Muttalib. It's not just me. All of the descendants of Abdul Muttalib are fearless warriors and battle-hardened veterans. You think you can threaten us and scare us with death? We are coming to you with the intention of meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the battlefield. He's telling this to Muawiyah. So you tell me after that, can it be said, and does it sound reasonable if we say that Imam Ali alayhi salam is actually in his letter to Muawiyah, in his other letter to Muawiyah. So this is letter number 28. But the Shura, the concept of how a leader is chosen after the Prophet is mentioned in letter number 6. So in letter number 6, can you really say he is doing taqiyya? Well, the akhbaris, this is what they try to promote. But does it make sense? That's a different thing. So khair, that's the akhbari answer. But that's not the only answer. There is another traditional usuli answer, which is more popular nowadays. So if you go to a traditional usuli scholar, this is what they will say. They will say, yeah, we agree, this is not taqiyya. Imam Ali alayhi salam is not one to do taqiyya with Muawiyah. Absolutely, agreed. But they will say that what Imam Ali alayhi salam is doing here, this theory that he has presented of how a leader should be chosen after the Prophet, they will say this is min bab ilzam al-khasmi bima alzama bihi nafsahu. The Imam doesn't really, this is not his theory. This is not what he believes in. You see, because what he's presenting in this letter, the view and the idea that he's presenting in this letter, it doesn't agree with the mainstream belief of today. So that's why the mainstream scholars will not accept, they would not want to accept that this is the view of the Imam. But then how do you explain away this letter? Because in this letter, Imam is saying it's very simple. After the Prophet, whenever there is an election after the Prophet, at least as far as the Muhajirin and Ansar are present, they should be the ones who should be consulted. A candidate among them should be nominated. If all of them, فَإِنِ اجْتَمَعُوا, if they have ijma', if they all assemble on عَلَى رَجُلٍ, on a person, on a man, وَسَمَّوْهُ إِمَامًا, and they declare him to be the Imam. They call him the Imam. They say, this is going to be our Imam. We choose him as our leader. Now, Imam here means political leader. He says, if this happens, if the Muhajirin and Ansar, they assemble, they gather and unite on one person, and they say, we will have him as our Imam, as our political leader, كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضَى, then the pleasure of Allah is achieved. Yani Allah is happy. Allah is pleased and satisfied with whatever they decide, whatever they choose. فَإِنْ خَرَجَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِمْ, and then if someone comes and tries to discredit their election or to say that, they have made a mistake or they have chosen the wrong person or I don't like their choice, he says this person will be forcefully, he will be made to submit to the decision of the public, and if he resists, you can even fight against him on grounds of going against the Sabilul Mu'mineen, and Allah authorizes the believers to fight against such people in the Quran. So, and he says Allah will leave such a person to his devices. So now if you ask the traditional scholar will say, well, this view that he's presenting, this is not our understanding today of how things should be after the Prophet. Because today you have all those other theories, divine appointment, and they use hadith of Al-Ghadir, and they try to use different texts to prove that no, the appointment of the Imams is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in any case, they would say that this letter should be understood in a different way. It should be interpreted differently. How? The traditional scholars will say that this is a case or an instance or an example of ilzam al-khasm bima alzama bihi nafsahu, of binding the opponent or the enemy to that which he has binded himself with. So this happens a lot in debates and polemics, is that when you're arguing with someone, you don't argue with them as per your view. Rather, you argue with them as per their view. So like, let's say if there's a Shia-Sunni debate going on, a Shia scholar, for example, will cite a narration from Sahih al-Bukhari, and he will tell the Sunni scholar, see, this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, which you regard as authentic. Now you cannot go and tell that Shia scholar that, wait, oh, okay, so you believe Bukhari, okay, very good. How about this narration from Bukhari? Bukhari, we have a narration which says that Imam Ali alayhi salam wanted to marry the daughter of Abu Jahl. What about this? You accept Bukhari because you are quoting from it. He will say, no, I'm quoting it only because the Sunni accepts it. The Shia scholar will say, I don't accept the transmissions of Bukhari. So then why are you quoting from it? He's saying, min bab ilzam al-khasmi bima alzama bihi nafsahu, because the discussant, the debater with whom I'm having a debate, he accepts the authority of Bukhari. Right? So this happens even in our discourses many of the times when we say this narration is authentic, or we quote Ayatollah Sheikh Asif Muhsini, or we quote this Ayatollah or that Ayatollah. People then assume that, okay, if you quote him in one place, that means you agree with everything he has to say. No. We are using traditional scholars. We're quoting them because our discussion is with followers of traditional scholars and with sometimes even scholars of the traditional persuasion. So that's why it doesn't mean that if I'm quoting a scholar, I necessarily agree with everything that they have to say. So in the same way, they are saying that what Imam Ali alayhi salam is doing is he's trying to bind Muawiyah. Muawiyah is challenging his authority, and so Imam is binding Muawiyah with his own a theory that Muawiyah himself is committed to. So yani he's holding Muawiyah against his own beliefs. He's using the beliefs of Muawiyah against himself. So this is what the traditional scholars will try to argue, is that what Imam is describing here, this is not his view. He is simply cornering Muawiyah with Muawiyah's view, because Muawiyah believes in this view. Now, is this argument valid that the traditional scholars make? Well, it is problematic. Why is it problematic? Because historically, if you go to see, Muawiyah never accepted this theory. So this cannot be a case of Imam Ali binding Muawiyah with his own theory. Muawiyah never accepted Shura. If Muawiyah was a believer in Shura, if he respected, because what is Imam Ali describing here? He's saying the way a leader is chosen is through the Shura of the Muhajirin and Ansar. Whoever the Muhajirin and Ansar choose, Allah is pleased with that choice, and the rest of the Ummah has no choice but to obey that choice, to follow the choice of the Muhajirin and Ansar. If this was the view of Muawiyah, he would never fight against Imam Ali, because Imam Ali was chosen by the Muhajirin and Ansar. And Imam Ali alayhi salam made it clear to him. And Muawiyah, even before Imam Ali wrote this letter, knew. The reports had come to him from Medina that the Muhajirin and Ansar have unanimously given bay'ah to Imam Ali. So if he was a believer in Shura, Imam Ali would not even have to write this letter, because he would have submitted to Imam Ali. He would have said, well, according to my theory, if the Muhajirin and Ansar agree on someone, then Allah is pleased with that. This is my theory, right? So he would follow it. But actually, he doesn't accept Shura. He is the biggest enemy and opponent of this idea of Shura. Muawiyah, in the history of Islam, is recognized. He has the dubious distinction of establishing the system of monarchy in Islam. There was no concept of monarchy, that a king will appoint his son as a king and the son will appoint his son. And the whole Umayyad dynasty was turned into a monarchy by who? You see, the first Khalifa did not appoint his son. The second Khalifa did not appoint his son. Third Khalifa did not appoint his son. There was no concept of hereditary succession in the early period. Who brought about this idea of hereditary succession, hereditary monarchy? It was Muawiyah. So Muawiyah believes in the monarchical system. He believes after the Prophet, Muhajirin and Ansar, to hell with them, literally to hell with them. He did not care about them. He was like, the power should go into the hands of the one who has the most amount of power, who has the military, who has this. He believed in power grabs, and that's why he himself grabbed power by force. And that's why he is remembered even to this day. And throughout history, the scholars of Islam have said that one of the really bad and evil things that Muawiyah has under his belt is that he crushed the system of Shura. He finished until his time. All the leaders were chosen by Shura. There was some degree of mutual consultation was there. For the first time, he is the one who grabbed power by force. There was a treaty, you will say, but the treaty was under what circumstances? You think Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam willingly and happily abdicated power? No. He was forced to by the circumstances because of Muawiyah's military might. He wanted to save the lives of the Muslims. He realized that if we fight Muawiyah, so much blood is going to be shed. And it's going to be a bloodbath for both sides. So in the interest of saving lives, Imam al-Hasan was forced to sign that treaty. So, but just because it's a peace treaty doesn't mean it was entirely peaceful. No, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam unwillingly had to concede power to Muawiyah. So Muawiyah, that's why the scholars say he took power by force, by military might. And the way of the precedent in the early period of Islam is you don't grab it by force, but by consultation. So in any case, that's why there is this statement that is attributed to Al-Hasan al-Basri. Some people, some of our Salafi brothers, they reject this transmission and they try to discredit it because there are Shia narrators in its chain. But khair, it might not be hujjah for them, but for the Shias, they have nothing against Shia narrators. And so Al-Hasan al-Basri is reported to have said that أربع خصال كن في معاوية لو لم تكن إلا أو لو لم يكن إلا واحدة منهن لكانت موبقة. He says there are 4 things that Muawiyah did. 4 things about Muawiyah. Even if he had done only one of them, it would be sufficient to destroy his hereafter. What are those 4 things? The first thing is his seizing power by force and abolishing the shura system. Min ghayri mushawara. He took power by force and without consultation with the Muhajirin and Ansar وفي الناس بقايا الصحابة. He took power by force at a time when Sahaba were there, Muhajirin and Ansar were there. Instead of consulting with them, instead of having shura with them, he grabbed it by force. And that's why they say this was a very big political crime that he committed, and they hold it against him. So, to say that Imam Ali alayhi salam is trying to bind Muawiyah in this letter by his own theory is wrong, because Muawiyah never signed up for this theory. He believes in monarchy. He is the biggest enemy of the Shura system. He is the one who demolished and destroyed the Shura system. So for Imam Ali alayhi salam to use the Shura argument against him is very similar to, for example, you using the Quran to prove God exists to an atheist like Richard Dawkins, who doesn't accept the Quran in the first place. He rejects the Quran. He doesn't believe it's the revelation of God. And you say, no, but this is my proof that God exists. No, you can't argue like this with Richard Dawkins. You can't. Maybe with a Muslim you can, but with Richard Dawkins you can't. Same thing here with Muawiyah. Imam Ali alayhi salam, if in this letter you are going to claim that no, he's trying to bind Muawiyah against his own theory, well, Muawiyah doesn't accept this. If he accepted this, he would, because Imam Ali alayhi salam, no one can deny the Muhajirin and Ansar, all of them gave him bay'ah. Majority of them gave him bay'ah. And that's what counts. In democracy, you don't need every single vote. Majority votes for someone, khalas, end of story. That's what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying. Majority of the Muhajirin and Ansar have voted for me, they've elected me, they're happy with me. Khalas, you don't, now the rest of the people don't have a choice. You have to respect the vote of the majority, the mandate of the majority. But then Muawiyah is saying, no, I can't accept your authority. And he's not accepting his authority. Why? Because Imam Ali alayhi salam has fired him. One of the first executive decisions of Imam Ali alayhi salam was to fire Muawiyah from his post. So he says, well, he's firing me from my post. I can't accept his authority. But the Muhajirin and Ansar have voted for him. He says, who cares about the Muhajirin and Ansar? I don't believe in Muhajirin and Ansar. I'm not one of them. I fought them my entire life in the time of the Prophet. Muawiyah, he came in the battle of Badr. Who was he fighting against? The Muhajirin and Ansar. They're his enemies in Jahiliyyah, in his period of Jahiliyyah, and even after Islam. You can see, if you go deeper into his history, how he oppresses the Muhajirin and Ansar when he becomes the leader. So in any case, to argue that this letter is the view, so they have basically turned the tables. They're saying this is not the view of Imam Ali, this is the view of Muawiyah. But history shows us a different side of Muawiyah. It shows us a Muawiyah who never had any respect or regard for the Shura. He didn't believe in the Shura. He never did Shura. If this was his theory, afterwards when he wanted to appoint Yazid as the Khalifa, the next Khalifa, he would have called the Muhajirin and Ansar, done Shura, none of that. He thrust Yazid on the Ummah. This is the other thing that the scholars say would be sufficient to ruin his hereafter. Without any mashwara, without any shura consultation, he thrust Yazid as the next, he appointed him basically, without any election. There was no election in which Yazid was appointed. Right? He did not consult the Muhajirin and Ansar and the Sahaba. He did it unilaterally. And that's what is held against him. So to argue that what Imam Ali alayhi salam is describing in this letter is Muawiyah's theory is very difficult. It's very problematic. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit in with history. So that leaves you with the other option, which is that Imam Ali alayhi salam is describing his own view. And this is strengthened by what he says at the end. He says, if the Muhajirin and Ansar, they agree on a person, who is going to be happy and satisfied with this choice? He says, كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضَى. He says, Allah is satisfied with this. If the Muhajirin and Ansar collectively and unanimously choose a person as the leader, Allah is satisfied with that choice. And He will not approve of any other person trying to challenge that. So, كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضَى. If this is not Imam Ali's view, then وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, Imam Ali just did iftira on Allah. Because he's bringing Allah into this. He's saying this system that I'm presenting you here, this is the system that's approved by Allah. He's not saying this is the system that's approved. كَانَ ذَلِكَ لَكَ رِضًا. He's not telling Muawiyah that, well, if, according to your system, according to your understanding, if the Muhajirin and Ansar collectively vote for a certain person, then that person is the Imam. This is your view, and this would be pleasing and satisfying for you. No. He says, كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضًا. This would be satisfying and the source of Allah's pleasure. Allah would be pleased with this. So he's describing Allah's system. After the Prophet, this is how Allah would want the ummah to behave and to perform, which is to choose leaders through mutual consultation. Now, the question then comes, well, for the first 6 months after the Holy Prophet, then what happened at Saqifa? What about all of that? Well, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam has a letter to the people of Basra in which he answers why the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam were not satisfied with what happened with Saqifa. It was not a case that they were not satisfied or they were displeased because they were not chosen, but rather it was because the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam felt that due process was not followed. How was it not followed? At Saqifa, a few of the Muhajirin and most of the Ansar were gathered, but the Ahlul Bayt, the Banu Hashim, the closest family and relatives of the Prophet, were busy with the burial rites of the Prophet. So they were not made part of the consultation. They were not made part of the shura. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, this is what he was very displeased and upset with. That, okay, fine, you wanted to choose someone, you wanted to have your election, fine, you should have waited for me. Am I not from the Muhajirin? Am I not from the Banu Hashim? Am I not from the family of the Prophet? You held an election and you didn't even include me in it. You didn't even give me the chance to nominate anyone or to nominate myself or you didn't even allow me to participate in that election aslan. So that's what he was displeased about, and that's why for the first 6 months it is established that he did not give bay'ah also. He kept away because he was upset and dissatisfied. But then later on, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says that the matter was resolved, and when he becomes Khalifa himself, he's saying, yes, إِنَّمَا بَايَعَنِ الَّذِينَ بَايَعُوا أَبَا بَكْرٍ وَعُمَرَ وَعُثْمَانَ عَلَى مَا بَايَعُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. He says, yes, ultimately, okay, maybe the first shura was not so perfect, but at the end of the day, it was the majority. So the same majority which chose the first 3 caliphs, they have now chosen me. So if their khilafah is valid, see, he is predicating the validity and legitimacy of his government on the validity of their government. He's saying the same people who gave them bay'ah, who gave them authority, have given me authority. I have the same mandate. Okay, and the terms and conditions are the same as they were in those times. So you, Muawiyah, now have no choice but to submit and surrender to the mandate and the decision of the majority. That's essentially what he's trying to say. And there are other auxiliary evidences within Nahjul Balagha itself, which the Ulama Abraar theory proponents would also use to strengthen their case, such as sermon number 92, where Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Da'uni waltamisu ghayri. So the heading is Lamma aradahu an-nasu ala al-bay'ati ba'da qatli Uthman. When people came to Imam Ali alayhi salam after the murder of Uthman, and they wanted to nominate him. They were trying to convince him to become the Khalifa. So look at what he says to them in sermon number 92. He says, Da'uni, leave me alone. Waltamisu ghayri, and go and search for someone else. Go and try and convince someone else. Don't come for me. And then he explains his reason why they should not come to him. He says, because the future is going to be full of challenges. These are not going to be easy times. These are very difficult times. Obviously, the ulama Abraar proponents would immediately grab at this and say, wait a minute, if he's divinely appointed, why would he say, Da'uni waltamisu ghayri, leave me alone and go search for someone else? For a divinely appointed person to tell you to leave him, not choose him as the leader, and go and choose someone else, this is basically him disobeying God. Because when God appoints you, he expects you to be ready and prepared to assume that role whenever the opportunity presents itself. So if he is obligated by Allah, if Allah has obligated him to serve as leader for the ummah, and Allah has put him in this position, then as soon as the people are ready, okay, first khilafah, they were not ready, second, third, they were not ready. Now that they're finally ready, he cannot afford to send them away and tell them, if he sends them away when Allah has determined and Allah has commanded him that no, you have to be the leader and I've chosen you. So for him to then send people away and say, leave me alone and go search for someone else would be a violation of Allah's command. If his leadership is the result of a command of Allah, then he has to, the command of Allah did not get cancelled after the first 3 caliphates, right? The command of Allah is still active. As per Allah, he's supposed to be the leader. If that is the case, then he is not, it would be wrong of him to tell people, leave me. How can he tell people to leave someone whom Allah wants and Allah has decreed and Allah has ordered and commanded to be the leader? So The ulama Abraar proponents would immediately grab at this verse, at this line, and they would say, Da'uni, he's saying, leave me alone and go and search for someone else. And then he describes why. He says, very challenging times are coming. And he says, look, the reason why I'm not interested in Khilafah, and the reason why I am, not willing, I'm not jumping at this opportunity that you're presenting me with, is because وَاعْلَمُوا أَنِّي إِنْ أَجَبْتُكُمْ رَكِبْتُ بِكُمْ مَا أَعْلَمُ. He says, look, if I respond to your request and your invitation to assume the government, I am going to lead you in accordance with my knowledge. And that's not going to be a very pleasant experience for you. Because my knowledge is based on the Quran and Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah is absolute haqq. Most people don't like haqq. When I start ruling in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah, life will become very tough for you. It will become very difficult. So, وَلَمْ أُصْغِ إِلَىٰ قَوْلِ الْقَائِلِ. The other thing you need to know about me is I'm not going to listen to anyone. I follow the Quran and Sunnah. I will not listen to where Allah and the Prophet have spoken. I will not listen to anyone. I will follow what Allah and the Prophet have said. And when I will do that, it's going to be very unpleasant for you. You're not going to like it. Because what Allah and the Prophet have decreed is not always in keeping with what the public wants. So I'm going to go with what Allah and the Prophet has said, and you're not going to like that. I'm not going to care for what the people say, for what the blamers blame. I'm not going to worry about that. So that's why he says it's better for you. إِن تَرَكْتُمُونِي فَأَنَا كَأَحَدِكُمْ. See, if I'm your leader, then I have obligations. I'm obligated to follow Allah and His Messenger. If you make me the leader, I have to enforce the laws of Allah and the Messenger. And that's going to make your life miserable. In a way, it's going to make it difficult. You're not used to, for the last 3 periods, you have been enjoying certain benefits which are going to be taken away from you. And I'm not going to listen to anyone. You come and tell me 1,000 times that, yeah, Imam, this policy is not good. People don't like it. I don't care. If Allah and the Messenger decreed it, I will enforce it. So, وَإِن تَرَكْتُمُونِي فَأَنَا كَأَحَدِكُمْ. So he says, but all of these obligations come on me when? When I become your leader. So long as I'm not your leader, I'm not obligated to enforce the Quran and Sunnah because I don't have authority, right? I'm just one of the فَأَنَا كَأَحَدِكُمْ. I'm an ordinary citizen. And an ordinary citizen is not obligated by Allah to enforce the Sharia of Allah. The Sharia of Allah will be enforced by the government, not by ordinary citizens. You don't have the concept of vigilante justice in Islam, right? The government and the state administers justice. So he says, وَإِن تَرَكْتُمُونِي فَأَنَا كَأَحَدِكُمْ. If you leave me alone, don't elect me, then I'll be like one of you. I'll be an ordinary citizen. So then those obligations of Allah will be non-binding for me. وَلَعَلِّي أَسْمَعُكُمْ وَأَطْوَعُكُمْ لِمَنْ وَلَّيْتُمُوهُ أَمْرَكُمْ. And he says it is possible that if you choose someone else, I will be the most obedient to that person whom you choose. So I will be a regular citizen and I will follow and obey whatever laws he passes. It may be, if they agree with the Quran and Sunnah, I will be even more ahead of you in following and observing and enforcing those laws. And then he says, وَأَنَا لَكُمْ وَزِيرًا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ مِنِّي أَمِيرًا. I would be better for you in an advisory role. If you make me a wazir, if you make me a minister, or you make me an advisor, that role would be more befitting. It would be better for you. خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It would be better for you. مِنِّي أَمِيرًا. I would be better for you as an advisor than I would be for you as a leader. So this is obviously, the ulama Abraar proponents would look at words like this and they would say, well, these don't look like the words of someone who is a disbeliever in the ulama Abraar theory, right? The other theory, these words do not seem to reflect that other theory. So khair, but this is all auxiliary evidence. It's discussed by the scholars, and ultimately you have these different views within the school of Ahlul Bayt. They existed right from day one, from the early period, and then throughout history. So this is in Nahj al-Balagha, and remember, Nahj al-Balagha is not a book that Sharif al-Radi is just mass collecting narrations without any, no. Read the introduction of Nahj al-Balagha. He believes that this is the speech of Imam Ali. He is not collecting fabricated narrations attributed to Imam Ali. Because the whole purpose, one of the reasons why he's writing Nahj al-Balagha is he wants to showcase the brilliance and the eloquence of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and to tell the world, as Farazdaq would say, that أولئك آبائي فجئني بمثلهم إذا جمعتنا يا جرير المجامع. As Farazdaq says in his poem addressing Jarir, he says, these are my forefathers. After mentioning the great achievements and feats and exploits and accomplishments of his forefathers, Farazdaq turns to Jarir and he says, these are my forefathers, so bring me the like of them. Can you bring me their match? So Sharif Radi says, he quotes this line of poetry and he says, I'm also, after compiling Nahjul Balagha, I'm putting this before the world and I'm telling them, أُولَٰئِكَ آبَائِي فَجِئْنِي بِمِثْلِهِمْ. These are my forefathers. Amirul Mu'mineen is my forefather. Can you bring someone as eloquent as him after the Holy Prophet? So he's showcasing the brilliance and eloquence of Amirul Mu'mineen. And so at least from the point of view of Sharif al-Radi, what he's mentioning in Nahjul Balagha is not just random transmissions from here and there. No, it is stuff that he actually believes to be the speech of Al-Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, except for some statements where he says, I am in doubt. This could be some say this is the hadith of the Prophet, some say this is the statement of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He says it could be either of them, but I'm presenting it here because it's also attributed to Imam Ali alayhi salam. But by and large, the kalam of Imam Ali that he's presenting you in Nahjul Balagha, even if you today refuse to accept it, Sharif al-Radi, who lived in the 5th century, had no problem. He's mentioning all of these texts in Nahjul Balagha as specimens of the eloquence and brilliance of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he doesn't negate them or refute them or say that they go against our aqidah. So basically that shows you that even until the 5th century, even until the time of Sharif al-Radi, even though Sharif al-Radi and Sharif Murtada are students of Shaykh al-Mufid, and by the time of Shaykh al-Mufid, the Ulama Abraar theory it's starting to become weak, and other theories, especially based on the transmissions that are coming in from Kufa to Baghdad, based on the Kufan school, the views of the Kufan school are becoming more and more mainstream. But even after Shaykh al-Mufid, you have his student, Sharif al-Radi, who is mentioning narrations in Nahjul Balagha that show you a different understanding of how, of the political philosophy and political views of those Shia who lived during the time of the Imams and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt themselves. So ultimately these texts are there. No one should and no one can force you to believe in anything. You don't like it, you don't want to follow it, that's your choice. But ultimately, as far as the school of Ahlul Bayt is concerned, it is wide enough to encompass all of these views. And yes, there was a time when these views were more mainstream, now they are less mainstream, that's a different story. But ultimately they are within the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam, and that's why those who want to, the option should always be there. If a scholar or if a person says, well, I'm more convinced by this school, by this sub-school within the school of Ahlul Bayt, well, and if he has evidence, if he has arguments, well, we should be tolerant of that. And if someone says, no, I'm convinced by this view, well, if the evidence is there and it's compelling, they should be allowed to hold on to their views. Ultimately, for madrasa teachers, they often ask, what do? We would say, well, don't impose any certain view on your students, especially if you're teaching Aqidah, for example. A lot of these political views, historical positions, they then became part of Aqidah. With the passage of time, people started adding them to Aqidah. Although scholars today will tell you it's not part of the Aqidah of Deen, it's part of the Aqidah of the madhab, of the school. But still, even within the school, you don't have uniform Aqidah. When you go to the past, you see diversity, you see divergence of opinions, you see difference of views. And so as a madrasa teacher, and even from the mimbar, what we should be doing essentially is presenting, at least at the very least, what you can do is equip and educate and empower your students with understanding of both. If there are two schools, of both schools, if there are multiple schools, you at least let them know that, yeah, there were minority opinions within there are today minority opinions within the school of Ahlul Bayt that were considered to be majority opinions in the past. And there are majority opinions of the past which are considered to be minority opinions today, but there are opinions within the school of Ahlul Bayt, and ultimately everyone should choose and decide based on what they feel is most convincing and compelling, and there should be no force. If someone wants to accept this theory, that is their choice. Someone wants to accept this theory, that is their choice. But ultimately we should have a culture of tolerance, just as Sharif al-Radi, Shaykh al-Mufid, al-Najashi, Sayyid al-Khuis, all of the great scholars. They mention so many personalities whose views don't agree with their own personal views, yet they don't discredit them, they don't throw them out of the madhab or the school, or they don't excommunicate them. A primary example of that is Abdullah ibn Abi Yafur. No one says he's outside the school. No one says he's not a follower of Ahlul Bayt. No one says he's demoting the station of Ahlul Bayt, but rather his true worth and value is recognized to this very day. Everyone says he's one of the most distinguished and esteemed companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who was extremely beloved to Imam himself. And that's why his view and his viewpoint and what he's promoting from the Imams with their approval is definitely worthy of consideration. And it's a respectable opinion within the school, even though it has become less popular today. But nonetheless, that does not detract from the fact that it used to be considered a valid opinion once upon a time. In fact, it was, according to Ayatollah Sheikh Muhsin Kadiwar's research, it was the mainstream view of the Shia in the first 3 to 4 to 5 centuries of the history of Shi'ism. So with that, I realize we've taken a lot of your time. We bring this to a close. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing. Also click the bell icon and choose the all option to get notified for upcoming videos automatically.